Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What if Deku had an S-rank empathy quirk? Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku thinks he might have been better off if he were quirkless. At least then he wouldn't register as a threat, could try to fly under the radar, invisible to anyone who cared. Instead he's trapped with a quirk he can't control and a lifelong tormentor with the face of the only friend he ever had. Really but really, he doesn't know how he ever thought he was worth something in the first place. How could someone with no friends and a quirk like his ever hope to make a difference? Wouldn't everyone be better off if he didn't exist in the first place? Is the only way he can help people to just stay out of their way? Morosely, Izuku sits hunched over his desk with those thoughts swirling around his head. He knows the teacher will be talking about their career plans today, and he knows he's going to get called out in front of the whole class. Which always ends the same way, with Izuku on the ground, in incredible amounts of pain, and Kaken standing above him, laughing cruelly at his inevitable fate. And everything turns out how he predicted, except Kaken goes for a more vicious, underhanded route than Izuku would have expected. It's not the first time he's been told to kill himself, though. Heck, it's not the first time Kaken has told him to kill himself. Doesn't mean he's any less surprised, or any less hurt. Honestly, Kaken would make such a great hero if he only thought about what comes out of his mouth sometimes. And maybe if he didn't have Izuku in his way, he wouldn't have to at all. He deserves what the explosive blonde puts him through. Deserves to be put in his place. The walk home isn't any better. Covering up as much skin as possible to avoid using his quirk can only do so much when the person is slime and can seep under his clothes and into his mouth and oh. The villain is already hurt, aching wherever he comes in contact with anything, and it only takes a few seconds for Izuku to feel the terror underneath the malicious SDSM suffocating him, and the villain's voice is just as slimy as the rest of him when Izuku's quirk manifests the whispers of his mind. Die already. He's coming, I don't have time for this, brat. I need your body, hurry up. Is this how he goes? He didn't even have to take action himself. But of course, the universe is never so merciful to him, is it? Freaking All Might saves his life, grinning as brightly as ever despite the radiating pain the boy can feel in the man's side when he merely taps his face to wake him up. He bolts upright, gasping in remembered agony as he pulls away from the hero, staring up at him in shock. How are you alive? All Might looks confused until Izuku gestures vaguely at his side, his words a mere horrified breath. You don't even have a stomach, what the heck? The man straightens his posture abruptly, a shadow passing over his brilliant grin. After a glance to either side, as if to make sure they're alone, he deflates in a cloud of smoke. Izuku, shocked into silence, can only listen as the stick-like figure outlines the most gruesome tale Izuku has ever heard outside of fiction, swearing the boy to secrecy at the end. As if Izuku were stupid enough to put his idol in danger like that. And then, as inevitable as Izuku's impending death by stress anxiety and heart failure, comes the question. How did you know? Is it your quirk? Still on the ground, Izuku curls in on himself. You could say that. All Might hasn't been smiling since he let go of his larger form, but now he takes it one step further and frowns, then asks the one question Izuku could go his entire life without having to answer again. What is your quirk, my boy? There isn't any way he's getting out of this, is there? The freaking symbol of peace just spilled what was probably his biggest secret to a random kid on the street. If he doesn't return the favor, what kind of person does that make him? And so he answers. My quirk is called Empathic Psychometry. He begins carefully, finally pulling himself to his feet so he can run if he needs to. It's touch-based, needs skin-on-skin contact, but I can't turn it off. He looks up at All Might and winces a bit at the intensity of his dark gaze, quickly ducking his head again. As soon as a physical point of contact is established, the first thing my quirk does is give me a sort of impression of a person's physical state. I feel the other person's pain in a sense. Izuku trails off, but it doesn't look like All Might really needs him to keep talking, something thoughtful entering his expression. So you felt my old injuries when I woke you up? Ah yes. really doesn't get why the man doesn't look uncomfortable yet, or why he doesn't make Izuku finish the explanation when he clearly hasn't shared everything. He's grateful. He doesn't particularly want to talk about it. All Might shifts his gaze to the bottles in his pockets. Well, my boy, would you like to accompany me to the police station to drop this villain off? I'm sure the detective I'm going to report to would like your version of events, and there should be someone there to look you over to make sure you're all right. Ah, he shifts and glances up at the man's face, baffled by the sincerity there. Sure. Excellent. Come along then. Even in his skeleton form, the hero is surprisingly fast, and Izuku has to scramble to catch up and keep pace. Now that the attention is no longer fixed on him, his long-suppressed curiosity is starting to bubble up inside of him. And come on, this is All Might. Who wouldn't want to ask him questions? All Might, to his credit, appears more than happy to answer the boy's timid queries, laughing boisterously as the kid's excitement and awe starts shining through his fear and concern. Looking back, this is probably one of the best days Izuku has had since manifesting his quirk, villain attack and all. He can only hope that there are more such days peppered about in his future for him to look forward to. Of course, it would be irrational of him to think any of them would have All Might in them, so maybe his life is just peaking right now. Who even knows? All Might will probably forget about him in a few days, and everything will return to normal. It's not like he has much of a life to look forward to anyways. All Might wants to train him. All Might wants to train him. He even told him his real name as soon as Izuku introduced himself and admitted he wants to be a hero. The hero's detective friend, Tsukachi-san, stifles a laugh behind his hand as Izuku vibrates in badly suppressed excitement, which is enough to snap the boy out of it. He smiles sheepishly and ducks his head, gripping the straps of his faded yellow backpack to keep his hands from shaking. No, kid, it's fine, the detective reassures him, still smiling slightly. I'm glad you're excited. I don't think Toshinori-kun could have picked anyone better. You seem like a good kid. As hesitant as he is to take the words at face value, Izuku can't help but glow at the praise. What he misses, though, is the flash of concern once he turns back to All Miyagi-san, grinning in anticipation. He misses how the detective makes a small note and shows it to his friend over the kid's shoulder, and the answering nod is nearly imperceptible to anyone who happens to see. The moment passes, though, and Yagi-san asks Izuku for his contact information, promising to get in touch soon to organize his training regime. Izuku quickly scribbles it down, his cheeks hurting with how broad his grin is. He blinks at a sudden idea and whirls on the detective. Can I talk to the villain? I have questions. The adults share another look over his head, and Yagi-san offers a slight raise to his eyebrows. He can't do much harm, can he? Izuku bounces in place, clasping his hands in front of him while he waits for the detective's verdict, despite the fact that this man he wants to speak to has literally tried to kill him less than an hour ago. After a long pause, Tsukachi-san sighs. Right this way. The quirk suppressant holding cell is a surprisingly short walk away, but Izuku doesn't dwell on it. He rehearses his questions instead, and as soon as Tsukachi-san gives him the go-ahead, he launches into them. When you first saw me, you said something about me being a disguise. Does that mean you can control bodies? Do they have to be human, or would animals work? Are animals too small? How much of your mass is you and how much of it is an extension of your quirk? Are you normally green and slimy, or is it because you were running from All Might through the sewers and picked up the stuff down there? How fine is your control? Do you have to move around as a blob, or could you spread yourself really thin and crawl across the ground to go undetected? Why are your eyes and mouth the only parts of you that are solid? Do you eat like normal people? Do you even have a stomach? Or internal organs at all? Do you just absorb? He's interrupted by Tsukachi-san clearing his throat, though it sounds suspiciously like he's covering up a laugh. I don't think he can answer your questions when you ask them that fast, Midoriya-kun. The villain looks almost grateful that Tsukachi-san stopped his incessant questions. Do you like quirks, Midoriya-shounen? Yagi-san inquires curiously, curling an arm around Izuku's shoulders and not so subtly leading him away before he's got his answers. Those were clever insights about a quirk you'd hardly seen in action. Oh well, he still gets to talk about quirks. It's a hobby of mine. Usually I write down my observations in my notebooks, but I've always wanted to be a hero, you see, and I thought, well, learning how to combat various quirks would be one of my best bets. Yagi-san smiles, harnessing the shadow of his alter ego's fearless grin while he urges Izuku to be on his way home. With dedication like that, I'm sure you will become an amazing hero. Izuku nearly floats home that evening with those words ringing in his head, and because, while oblivious, he is a smart boy, spills the entire series of events to his mom. They both cry. A lot. It's a good time. Then the next day, Yagi-san calls. Izuku's mom bursts into tears as soon as he introduces himself. Are you okay? He sounds flustered, surprised, his voice just loud enough for Izuku to hear from his place on the couch next to her. Is this a bad time? No, you're fine. She sniffs, smiles waveringly. I'm just so glad you've offered to train my boy. It's such an honor. At the other end of the line, Yagi-san chuckles, and speaks again, but his voice is lower now that he isn't panicking, and Izuku can't hear him anymore. But that's fine. He's probably just talking to Ka-san about training, right? Unless he's calling to call it all off, because he realized he made a mistake, or he found someone better, or... Thankfully, Izuku's worries are for nothing, and the next day after school finds him on a beach full of trash and looking up at the shadow of a smile on Yagi-san's face. It's almost surreal being here, being trained by the #1 hero. His enthusiasm may wane slightly over the next several months of hauling trash, but not his effort. Day after day he shows up at the beach and cleans, usually with Yagi-san, but also on his own. He follows the schedule set for him, exercises, eats when and what he's told. The entrance exam looms closer than ever. Izuku knows it will be a turning point for him. He just hopes he doesn't fail too spectacularly. Izuku doesn't think he's ever consistently been this on guard his entire life, and that's saying something. Just walking through UA's gates is nearly an out-of-body experience, and he's very careful not to trip and make a fool of himself prematurely. Following the crowd of other applicants to the exam introduction, Izuku glances around for a seat, and wow, he knew there was going to be a lot of people, but the crowd is making him antsy, and is there a way for him to watch from the back of the auditorium? Nope, assigned seating. Hey, he can do this. Just breathe, Izuku, breathe. Having Present Mike preside over the entrance exam is a welcome surprise. Being seated next to Kaken for the introduction is not. The robots. Izuku has mixed feelings about the robots. On the one hand, his quirk is decidedly unhelpful in fighting anything non-human. On the other hand, he doesn't have to use his quirk, then, so, a win? Kinda? It's not like he isn't going to fail whether he uses his quirk or not, so does it really make a difference? Besides, he has his arms wrapped from his fingers to his shoulders, he's blocked himself from using it anyway. The other applicants milling around before the gate of the exam appear to sense his distress and murmur amongst themselves to laugh at his discomfort, writing him off before the exam's even begun. And while they aren't exactly wrong, it still hurts. He should be used to it by now, he doesn't know why it always bothers him. They're right after all. Start. Izuku jolts into action before he even thinks about it, hyper-aware of the area around him like always. He wants to get as far as he can before he starts looking for points so he doesn't have to risk brushing shoulders with his competitors. Present Mike says something else, but it's drowned out by the blood rushing in Izuku's ears. The first robot he comes across ends up being destroyed by a blonde boy with some kind of beam quirk. Immediately after destroying the machine he poses, as if there are hidden photographers, and Izuku has to tackle him out of the way of another robot's lasers. The boy flushes, mutters what Izuku hopes is thanks in what sounds like French, and runs off before Izuku can bring words to his tongue. He sighs and moves on. Though he has little opportunity to take down a robot himself, and in the situations where he does he often finds himself shoving other applicants out of the way of near certain maiming. Has it occurred to any of them that passing the exam doesn't mean much if they have no legs or brain damage or a broken spine coming out of it? Yes, Izuku is being reckless just being here, but he has reasons. Sort of. Okay, not really, but at least he's aware of his surroundings, alright? Aware enough to realize, oh, that's a big robot at the same time as that girl is going to die. Which, yeah, Izuku doubts the proctors would let that happen. But no one has stopped the robot yet, which means he's going to act on the assumption that they aren't going to interfere. Not to mention his feet were already moving before he rationalized the decision anyway. He gets the girl first, body slamming the rock out of the way, and possibly dislocating his shoulder but and yanking her out. Sweeping her up into his arms and shouting a quick catch, he throws her with all the strength he can muster at a purple-haired boy not far away. He wouldn't call being knocked down by her flying body a catch, but neither of them are dead, so it's fine. Well, neither of them are dead yet. He still needs to defuse the robot. Izuku has never been so glad for his expertise in running from bullies, because apparently the necessary dexterity and agility needed translate well to scaling giant robots. It hardly takes a minute for him to clamber up the robot's side, chanting a mantra of don't look down in his head while ignoring his throbbing, useless shoulder, and he tucks himself into the crook of its neck to reach down and wrap his hands firmly around the delicate wires within. Muttering under his breath, he braces himself. Here goes everything. He yanks out the wires. This, of course, destabilizes the zero-pointer, which then tips and falls. Thinking quickly and realizing that if he doesn't move fast he is very likely going to die, Izuku leaps off the bot moments before it crashes into the ground, tumbling into a roll to break what momentum he can. He scrambles to his feet, arm hanging dislocated at his side. After all, it would be too much to expect that he'd come out of such an experience unscathed. With practiced ease, Izuku grabs the wrist of his limp arm and pulls it out straight in front of himself, wincing as the ball of his humerus pops back into its socket. He casts his gaze around the immediate area as Present Mike calls the end of the exam, while absently unwrapping the bandages from around the injured arm and looping them around his forearm and shoulder as a makeshift sling without really looking. The girl he'd saved and the boy he'd thrown her at stand just out of the way, leaning against each other and staring like they saw a ghost. Izuku should probably reassure them? Though he's not really sure how he's supposed to go about doing that. It's not like he even got any points, so he can't comfort them by telling them it didn't affect his results. For once, the universe takes pity on him, and Recovery Girl approaches the two and speaks to them in a low voice. Izuku takes the opportunity as the gift it is to wave goodbye above her head and jog out of the arena before she can turn and see him. It's not like he's that badly injured, and he'd rather avoid having her use her quirk on him because that would mean she'd have to touch him and… It's self-explanatory, right? Now all he has to do is wait for his rejection letter and try to figure out how he's going to cope with Yagi-san's disappointment. When Izuku can't sleep, he wanders. It's dangerous, sure, and Ka-san would definitely freak if she knew about it, but there is just something about the relatively quiet streets and the soothing dark and having the cool, fresh, night air all to himself that calms the ever-present trembling in his bones. It's relaxing, really, despite the constant threat of bodily harm if a mugger comes across him. Not that any ever have. That doesn't mean that it isn't instinctual. To whirl around and punch a strange man in the face when he feels a touch on his shoulder, though. Izuku's fist meets the flesh of the man's palm instead, which he is intensely grateful for when he recognizes who he almost assaulted. Your Eraserhead. And honestly, the amount of awe in his voice is going to be so embarrassing when he looks back on this moment. It's an honor to meet you, sir. The underground hero blinks slowly before sighing and releasing Izuku's fist. What are you doing out so late, kid? And how do you know who I am? Oh well. Izuku rubs the back of his neck sheepishly, still starry-eyed but trying to pull it together enough to actually formulate a semi-coherent answer. My room is kind of stuffy and constricting sometimes, so I go out on occasion to get some air, clear my head. Don't worry though. I know the neighborhood really well, and I can defend myself if it comes down to it. Though I'd probably just run, to be honest. I mean, I did grow up with these streets, so… and still he rambles. And in front of a pro hero no less. How embarrassing. And Eraserhead crouches in front of him, head tilted to one side. My other question. I'm a big hero fan. You have, a smallish forum online that I found, he explains, looking intently at his feet now because, oh, right, underground hero, and he probably doesn't want random kids knowing about him? There aren't very many images, But there's enough that I recognized you. And most of the information is actually speculation? I mean, there's a few stories from people you've rescued, like kids you've gotten out of abusive homes and off the streets and stuff, but that's the only concrete information. People don't even know your quirk. Which, can I ask? It's some kind of quirk eraser, right? When he glances up to gauge his reaction, the man just blinks at him again, face expressionless, and waves a hand for Izuku to elaborate. Huh? No one's ever said you had anything showy, from the stories, and you're underground anyway, so that wouldn't be ideal. In all likelihood it would be a mental-based emitter, and many stories corroborate the theory, since the people you fight don't use their own quirks, usually. Though often you take them down by surprise, so there's always the chance that they just never have the chance to. Except for mutations, of course, but those can't really be erased or reversed without hurting the person. And, does your quirk happen to be activated through your eyes? Because in a lot of the pictures I've seen, or at least the ones where you've lost your goggles, which are really cool by the way your eyes are glowing red, but right now they're black, and the brightness is too high for it to just be red eye from the picture itself. But if that's the case, and it is activated through your eyes, that means your hair is kinda a giveaway? Because it looks like it's floating in the images where your eyes are red, and that's going to be even more obvious in person. Have you thought of cutting it? Or even just tying it back if you like it long? Doesn't it get in your eyes, too, when you're trying to fight? Do people ever try to grab it? Because if your quirk can erase people's quirks, you still have to fight them physically, and I know for a fact that hair is a great handhold in a fight. But you must be really good at fighting without quirks, huh? I mean, you've had to fight mutation quirks hand-to-hand and you've come out on top. How long did you have to train for that proficiency, I wonder? And I guess it's an even better ace up your sleeve if you ever end up in a situation where you can't use your quirk, because it would still give you a leg up on your opponent. Kid, Eraserhead interrupts, holding up a hand. Breathe, for a sec, alright? Just listening to you is making me tired. Izuku clams up instantly and ducks his head, hiking up his shoulders around his ears. Sorry. Why are you apologizing? Why does he sound more exasperated? You weren't doing anything wrong. And you're right, I do have an eraser quirk activated through my eyes. That was a pretty clever analysis, kid, for how little information you had. The excitement at actually having one of his analysis theories confirmed and having his anxiety tempered slightly by the flatly delivered reassurance prompts him to lift his head enough to look the hero in the eye. Really? Eraserhead raises an eyebrow, and somehow that is the only part of his face that moves. Does he, like, practice? Do you think I would say something I didn't mean? No, he backtracks hastily, waving his arms in front of him. It's just, people usually think it's creepy when I ramble like that, so it just took a second to sink in that you actually. Another sigh, and the hero rises to his feet. I'm not easily impressed, kid. But that aside, we should be getting you home. Ah, right. Izuku glances up at the man's face. Wait, we? Yes, we. It's late. I'll be escorting you home. Now lead the way. Izuku hesitates, of course, because even though this is a hero, he's still a stranger. Eraserhead picks up on his pause and rolls his eyes. Unless, of course, you'd prefer I take you to the nearest police station and we call your parents from there. That won't be necessary. Izuku squeaks, waving his hands in front of his face, and quickly turns on his heel. I live this way. He doesn't want to wake Ka-san, especially by having the police call her. A call in the middle of the night from legal authorities and then finding Izuku isn't in his room? She is already an anxious individual by nature, already wary of his quirk as much as she tries to not let it show or interfere with caring for him. This is the sort of thing that could make the stress too much for her. He doesn't want to know what she'll do when that happens. Will she get sick from sheer anxiety? Will she snap under the pressure? Will she leave because she can't handle him anymore? Will she finally hate him like everyone else? Eraserhead follows behind Izuku silently and doesn't comment when Izuku climbs through his window instead of entering through the door. Izuku knows the man isn't going to be leaving anytime soon. He strikes him as the type to make sure Izuku is going to stay put before returning to his patrol. So Izuku plays it safe and goes to bed, ignoring how the darkness is almost tangible and presses in around him. He only has to wait a few more hours anyway, and then the sun will be up and it will be socially acceptable for him to be awake. Besides, it's not like a hero has the time to make sure he doesn't sneak out tomorrow night, right? Though the next night Izuku isn't fortunate enough to run into a hero again when he returns to his midnight meandering. Oh no, the next night, he runs into a man who is almost as far from a hero as one can get. Sir? Tamura levels a glare in the direction of the random green-haired brat who for some reason is walking alone at night, and the kid cringes as if he's going to be hit but, unfortunately, speaks up anyway. You're bleeding. His fingers halt in their scratching, and when had they started? He honestly can't remember. Not that it really matters. I can help if you'll let me, the kid offers with a soft earnestness that simultaneously is kind of endearing but also threatening to give Tamura hives. I have a pretty good first aid kit in my bag. And so, for reasons that fail to reveal themselves to him, Tamura sits on the curb to let the brat work. This seems to make the string bean's day since his face brightens significantly behind the scarf wrapped around his neck and he immediately digs through his aggressively yellow bag to retrieve a small, black kit. The kid pulls out disinfectant and a box of Band-Aids, and he apologizes for both, the disinfectant because it stings, and the Band-Aids because they're plain. I would stock hero ones, he explains in his soft voice, not meeting Tamura's eyes. But they're expensive and don't actually work as well. He pauses, gloved hands hovering just over Tamura's newly bandaged neck, and huffs a small, bitter laugh. Kinda like actual heroes, really. Tamura, for the first time, speaks up. Oh, how so? Well, the kid startles at his raspy voice, jerking back to sit on his heels and ready to bolt at a moment's notice, as if he hadn't expected him to speak at all. They're not really fixing anything? I mean, I'm grateful that they save people's lives and put their own lives on the line every day, but they're kinda only patching up the problems after the fact, and also only once the damage has already been done. Not to mention, a lot of them don't care for anything but a temporary fix and make do with shoddy work that results in extra property damage and showboating. The kid slowly gets more worked up, putting more intensity behind his words, but his voice never gets any louder than the summer breeze quiet. It's been from the start. I get that popularity and how many villains they bring in determines how they get paid, but none of them actually try to prevent people from becoming villains in the first place. If they don't fix the system, they'll only ever be addressing symptoms like crime. But then why would they want to fix it, logically? Sure, most start out with good intentions, but in the end they get paid for fighting villains, not preventing them, and they're only human. They want to get paid for their work. If they stopped society from creating villains, what need would the world have for heroes? Tamura, inordinately pleased, chuckles. For a shy kid, the brat sure can talk. Not that you're wrong, but that's kinda cynical, kid. At that comment, the squirt seems to remember that he isn't alone and ranting to himself, marking the return of the blushing and quiet stammer. Sorry? Sorry. You probably, didn't need to listen to, well, all that. It's fine, he interrupts, surprised by his own mellow mood. But I wonder, what are you gonna do about it? The squirt blinks up at him owlishly, seemingly still trying to process the fact that he isn't annoyed. It's a problem, yeah? Tamura prods. You think someone should fix it? I can tell you're a clever brat. You know that if you don't, probably no one will. So what's your plan? I'm trying to fix it from the inside out, he admits sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. He finally sits instead of crouching ready to sprint and rubs his calves like they're sore. I'd probably have more influence that way, maybe get some people to help, he sighs, though, and droops like a wilted flower. Still, it's more of a pipe dream than anything. It's hard to hope that I pass the entrance exam anyway. He startles again when Tamura snorts. Squirt, listen, if you're as smart as I think you are, they'd be idiots to let you slip through the cracks. The kid turns his face away. Not smart enough to fight robots, though. Robots? He's glad the kid is looking away, because he's sure that his expression isn't a nice one. Really? UA has robots in their entrance exam? Biased much? Wow, I should not get that wide. And are they sparkling? Tamura's pretty sure they're sparkling, and the kid has no right to look like a kicked puppy being offered a head pat. as if he hadn't expected to have anyone take his side. Well, Tamura knows quite a bit about that. Maybe Sensei would be interested in letting Tamura take in a player too? But how to catch his interest? Hey, what is your quirk anyway, kid? Oh, that is a full body flinch right there. Tamura might as well have hit him. Let me guess, villainous? The string bean flinches again, though smaller, as if trying to hide it. Tamura doesn't need more reasons to hate society, and yet. But right now, he has other priorities. He raises his own hands. Believe me, kid, I get it. Look. He grabs for a random discarded cup in the gutter and shows the kid how it crumbles to dust under his hand. I know all about villainous. For more reasons than just his quirk, but the squirt doesn't need to know that. The squirt whose eyes are somehow wider, and is he holding his breath? And suddenly, the kid explodes. How did you do that? It's touch activated, clearly, but 5-point touch, right? Is it automatic, or can you turn it off and on? Do you have gloves to limit it? If you don't, it's probably because you want to be able to use it at a moment's notice. I can't even imagine how useful that would be for self-defense. And rescues. You could just disintegrate rubble and debris if it fell on someone. Or you could use it to pick up after a villain fight. Or for infiltration, you could just turn the lock to dust. What is your dust made of, actually? Does it have the same chemical composition as whatever you disintegrated? Or does your quirk turn it into something else? Can it be reversed? How small are the dust particles you create? Can you control the size, or is it static? What effect would your quirk have on dust? I'd assume nothing, since you'd need all 5 fingers to touch one piece, but how tightly packed would it need to be one item? What constitutes as one item according to your quirk? Because a quilt is a single object, but you can't touch all the pieces of it at once, and each piece without the thread is its own separate entity. Would it still count as a full object according to your quirk? Or does the thread make it a singular object? If so, you could easily attach several objects together and disintegrate them all at once. But you'd want to be careful not to get tangled up in it yourself. Could you accidentally hurt yourself with it if you weren't paying attention? That would probably hurt a lot. You'd need skin grafts at the very least, and depending on how long you were in contact, maybe muscle damage. How quickly can you disintegrate things, anyway? Is that something you control, or is it a constant? If you could control it? Tamura, amused and intrigued despite himself, lets the kid rant. Yes, Sensei would definitely be interested in this one. The squirt is clearly clever enough to actually pull off whatever it is he's planning to do with the hero system, and wouldn't that accomplish the same goal? The end of hero society, brought about by a hero hopeful, one of their own. Sensei would appreciate the irony of that, surely? For now, Tamura is looking forward to seeing how far this kid can go. Izuku stares at the disc on his desk, still numb from the message he's seen 3 times now but still can't bring himself to believe. He received 0 villain points, as expected, but 93 rescue points. Did something happen to the air? Maybe his lungs? He's feeling a bit lightheaded and shaky. Maybe he should just rest his forehead on his desk and wait for the world to disappear, wait for the numbers and what they mean to stop whirling around dizzily in his head. He's going to UA. He passed with the top score. Kakin is going to kill him, but it'll be worth it. Izuku. Cousin calls from outside his room, tremulous. Are you all right? With some difficulty, wiping in vain at the tears constantly pouring from his eyes, Izuku staggers to the door and rips it open. His face hurts, and he realizes it's because he's grinning wider than he has in a long time. I passed, cousin. I passed. His mother covers her mouth, tears welling in her own eyes, and she swoops down to gather him into a hug. They celebrate with Katsudan that night. Yagi-san calls personally to congratulate him, and the next day Izuku begins preparing for the school that will change his life in more ways than he can possibly imagine. Izuku stands in front of the door to 1A, a knot of tension trapped in his throat and making it hard to breathe. This is it. He's here, finally after so long. Taking a deep breath to brace himself, he pushes open the door and peers inside. Only to end up wishing he'd never gotten into UA in the first place. Kakin is sitting in the front of the class, feet kicked up as if he owns the place as he cusses out the strict-looking boy who had questioned Present Mike about the fourth robot during the introduction to the entrance exam. Maybe Izuku can sneak past them without being noticed? That sounds like the best idea. He doesn't really want to confront Kaken right now. Or ever. Yeah, that sounds like the best option. That is, until the girl he'd saved from the zero-pointer calls out behind him. It's you. The boy who threw me at Shinkun to save me during the entrance exam. This, unfortunately, draws the attention of most of the rest of the class, including the boy with the glasses. He wastes no time in approaching Izuku and bowing at a perfect 90-degree angle which shows excellent control of his core and back. Izuku can't help but notice and introducing himself. I am Ida Tenya from Sumai Academy. If you are indeed the one who took down the zero-pointer, as I suspect, that would make you Midoriya Izuku, the top scorer of the entrance exam, correct? Though, I'm sorry to have to say that your scarf is against school regulation dress code. Hyper-aware of Kaken's presence, as always, Izuku doesn't miss how his head snaps around at the mention of Izuku's name, nor how the blonde's expression shifts from one of mere irritation to cold rage. Deku? You're the fucker who took my spot. Izuku's almost more anxious of the fact that Kaken hasn't made a single move towards him than of the clear anger on his face. I didn't intend. Kaken releases a small explosion, face still terrifyingly controlled, shutting Izuku up. For some reason, the rest of the class ignores the temperamental blonde in favor of gathering around Izuku, offering congratulations and asking questions too quickly for Izuku to either answer or escape, like he so dearly wants to. Wow, dude. How'd you get first? Do you have some flashy quirk, or what? That girl said you saved her, right? So manly. A truly noble effort. Fitting of a hero in training. They only crowded closer the more they spoke over each other, increasing Izuku's nerves tenfold. Soon they'll be close enough to touch him, and he can't even imagine how disastrous that would be. And, of course, Kaken chooses that moment to make his voice heard. A hero? That shitty nerd? He's the farthest thing from a hero. Despite long exposure, each word still cuts like a knife, and Izuku draws further into himself, uncaring of the voices raised in his defense. He can't hear them anymore, anyway, the blood rushing in his ears drowning them out. He'd speak up, ask for some space, but already he's struggling to find air in such an enclosed area with so many bodies so close. Too close. His chest is too tight, his vision blurry and wavering, his head pounding. He knew showing up to UA was a mistake. All of this is a mistake. Kaken's right. He can't even walk into a classroom without a panic attack. How is he supposed to become a hero? Especially with his quirk. Suddenly the world quiets, and he finds something cold and solid against his back as he is guided to slide down the hallway wall to sit on the floor by a grounding hand on his shoulder. The hand moves to grab his own, wrapped in bandages as always, and press it against its owner's chest. Instinctually he syncs his breathing with this other person's, slowly coming back to himself. The man crouched in front of him when he finally looks up seems familiar, and after a second his identity clicks into place in Izuku's mind. Eraserhead. Izuku knows that only pros teach at UA, but is Eraserhead a teacher? Yes, I'm a teacher, problem child. Your homeroom teacher. The hero straightens to his full height and holds out a hand to help Izuku up. Now, the rest of the class has settled down unless they want to be expelled. Are you ready to join them? Blushing furiously at both his embarrassing panic attack and his mumbling slip, Izuku allows himself to be pulled to his feet and quickly hurries into class, ducking his head into his scarf to avoid any curious eyes. He's had enough attention to last him a lifetime already, but he knows he's not lucky enough to avoid further scrutiny after that whole everything. Acting as if nothing happened, their teacher introduces himself, Aizawa-sensei, and instructs the class to change into gym clothes and meet him on the PE grounds. Changing in the same room as the rest of the boys is a big no-go for Izuku, and he casts about for any way to avoid that terrifying situation before settling on slipping into a bathroom stall. His anxiety about possibly being late spurs him on, and he arrives at the grounds only after three others: the tall girl with the ponytail, the dichromatic boy, and the invisible girl with the floating uniform. It doesn't take long, though, for the rest of the class to filter their way in, and as soon as everyone arrives, their teacher begins. Today we're going to have a quirk assessment test, he announces, his back to the class. Instantly the students echo him in varying levels of confusion. A quirk assessment test? But what about the entrance ceremony? The girl he'd saved asks incredulously. The orientation? If you're going to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. The man finally turns to glance at the class over his shoulder. That's also how the teachers run their classes. Izuku begins to tune the man out, focusing more on the warm bodies around him way too close, especially after the whole fiasco before, with some of them seeming to shuffle closer to each other for some sort of comfort under their teacher's dead-eyed glare. Midoriya. Izuku snaps to attention. Aizawa-sensei locks eyes with him. You finished at the top of the practical exam, right? In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? 58 meters, sir, he offers quietly, trying not to shrink into himself too obviously as all the attention is focused on him. The man raises one eyebrow, unimpressed. Try doing it with your quirk. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. When Izuku hesitates because he doesn't have a physical quirk, what is he supposed to do? He huffs and rolls his eyes. Hurry up. Give it all you've got. Tentatively, Izuku takes his place in the circle, hefting the ball in his hand. Clearly he needs to prove himself in these tests, but shouldn't Aizawa-sensei know that he doesn't have a flashy quirk already? It should be in his student file, but maybe he hasn't looked at them yet because he doesn't want to be biased? Or he doesn't want to bother? Still, Izuku doesn't want to let him down. He must have a reason for calling up Izuku first, beyond his score in the entrance exam, right? He probably thinks that Izuku has some kind of trick up his sleeve, or is smart enough to come up with something. He said Izuku can do whatever he wants as long as he stays inside the circle. So maybe? As the idea slowly takes shape in his mind, Izuku reaches up and unwraps the scarf from around his throat. He settles the ball in the middle of the scarf, gripping both ends of the fabric in his hand as a makeshift slingshot, though it doesn't quite have the elasticity that he would prefer. Either way, it's enough for what he is about to attempt. Deftly and without too much thought, he swings it with brisk movements above his head to build up momentum and snaps the scarf sharply forward, releasing one end in the throw. The ball is sent hurtling across the range before hitting the ground, bouncing and rolling to a stop. When he looks up at Aizawa-sensei, his expression hasn't noticeably changed, which could either mean that Izuku has failed his expectations or that he hasn't disappointed him at all. Though with his luck it's probably the former, so he turns away and backs quickly out of the circle to get out of the spotlight as quickly as he can. Wait, can he do that? Someone shouts, baffled, and another person adds. Does that count as throwing at all? 79 meters, Aizawa-sensei announces, casting his gaze across the class and easily shutting them up. And yes, that was allowed. He stayed inside the circle, which was the only condition. Heroes have to be creative and use what they have, after all. What's this? A pink girl exclaims. It looks fun. A black-haired boy cheers. We can use our quirks as much as we want. As expected from the hero course. Izuku swallows nervously at the dark aura surrounding Aizawa-sensei and slinks even farther to the back of the group. It looks fun, huh? The class stills at his tone. You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? Aizawa-sensei grins down at the students, ominous and seeming to tower over them despite not having moved. Alright, whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be punished with expulsion. The class riots in protest, but Izuku has already drawn inside himself, panicking quietly. Aizawa-sensei already seems unimpressed with Izuku and the fact he didn't use his quirk, and for tests like these it doesn't really matter if he does. He might as well be quirkless. At the edge of his perception he hears the teacher's droning voice explaining the unfairness of the world and how heroes are the ones who reverse such situations, explaining how UA will be difficult. Izuku knows this, maybe better than most of his classmates, and forces himself to even his breaths because Aizawa-sensei is right. It's not fair. Nothing is, but that just means that Izuku has to make up for it himself. Besides, isn't that what he's going to have to do as a hero? Go beyond. Plus ultra. Aizawa-sensei finishes, a sadistic smirk still playing at his lips. Overcome it with everything you've got. But, of course, the universe won't make this at all easy, and Izuku is paired with Kaken for the first test. He can't help but hesitate at the starting line for half a second when the other boy uses his explosions to give himself extra speed, but it's enough. Kaken is far ahead, and Izuku can feel his teacher's gaze boring into him as he sprints towards the finish line. The grip strength test isn't as terrible, but watching his classmates and especially the six-armed boy with the mask, it is only too clear that not terrible isn't the same as good or the excellent that he needs. Then there is the standing long jump and repeated side steps. Oh, his classmates' quirks are so cool. How is he supposed to compete? The fifth test is the ball throw again, and Izuku is certain his jaw drops to the ground when the girl he saved, Uraraka, according to Aizawa-sensei, throws the ball into outer space. Midoriya, Aizawa-sensei calls as she returns to the crowd. There are 2 attempts at the ball throw. Would you like to go again? There's an ulterior motive for giving him this option. Izuku knows. It's unlikely that anyone else would have been given this option if they had used their quirk the first time around. But he doesn't want to back down and draw undue attention to himself, so he accepts the ball with shaking hands and steps into the circle nervously. When he feels his quirk disappear, it's almost like all of the tension in his body is stripped away with it. He relaxes for the first time in longer than he cares to remember, and he shoots Aizawa-sensei Eraserhead a brief smile before throwing the ball with all the strength he can muster. It flies, and Izuku is dead certain that he would not have been able to throw nearly as far if his teacher had not erased his quirk. He wonders what that means for him in the long run, if Aizawa-sensei will determine that he holds no potential with such a disruptive and troublesome quirk that clearly holds him back despite him never using it, but can't really find it in himself to care. After all, he finally knows what it feels like to be free of his curse. For that alone, he will always be grateful to the man. Though, judging by the look on his face promising that they'll speak about this later, Aizawa-sensei isn't as pleased by his reaction to becoming temporarily quirkless. But it was nice while it lasted. Maybe another hero school would accept him? Before Aizawa-sensei can say anything, though, one of Izuku's classmates shouts, "Who next, sensei?" And Aizawa-sensei turns to call the next person up, freeing Izuku to hide behind the others until the next test. Once everyone has participated in the ball throw, they move on to the last 3 tests. He doesn't do too badly during the sit-ups and seated toe touch, and he'd say that running from bullies for most of his life did wonders for his stamina for the long-distance run. And then, finally, the tests are over and it's time to see their final scores. The person with the lowest score will be expelled, Aizawa-sensei reminds them, and without further ado presses a button on the device he used to record all their scores to display their rankings. And right beside the number 16 is Izuku's name. He almost sobs in relief. As long as whatever happened at the ball throw doesn't make their teacher decide to kick him out, Izuku is safe. Well, safe for now. Aizawa-sensei has already proven to be unpredictable at best. By the way, I was lying about the expulsion. Case in point, it was a logical ruse to draw out the upper limits of your quirks. One of his classmates comments on how obvious the deception was, while the purple-haired boy from the entrance exam, probably Shinso Hitoshi, according to the rankings, nearly melts into the ground with a sigh, but Izuku is more focused on avoiding Aizawa-sensei's gaze to pay attention to the others. With that, we're done here, the man announces, waving them away. There are handouts with the curriculum and such in the classroom, so when you get back, look over them. Gladly, Izuku ducks his head and moves to follow the class inside, though his relief is short-lived. Not you, Midoriya. Izuku freezes, and a few of his nicer classmates shoot him pitying looks before hurrying off to save their own hides. Reluctantly and without looking up, Izuku turns to his teacher and waits for what he has to say, holding on tightly to his thoughts so they don't run away with him before his teacher can speak for himself. There is a moment of silence, and when Aizawa-sensei begins talking, his voice isn't as flat and harsh as it was during the assessment. Would you like to explain to me what I saw out there today? I don't have a physical quirk, sir, Izuku explains softly, wringing his hands in front of him. I could see as much. That's not what I meant. Startled, Izuku glances up sharply. Aizawa-sensei's expression is still serious as ever, but there's something in his eyes. During the ball throw, I erased your quirk to see how you would react, because I had assumed you were confident in some kind of mental or skill-related quirk, and it would be better to show you that one needs to be prepared and practiced even without their quirk. I now know I was wrong in my assumption. What I do not know is why you relaxed, why you seemed grateful when I erased your quirk. I would like you to explain. Again, Izuku averts his eyes and stares intently at the ground as if it's the most fascinating thing in the world. He's being asked already? On the first day? Why can't he just catch a break? He doesn't want to talk about his quirk, he'd rather never talk about his quirk. Why do people have to keep asking him? Why do they have to bring it up at all? He would prefer to pretend it doesn't exist. It's horrible and invasive anyway. Everyone is better off without him giving himself the opportunity to use it. Why couldn't he just be quirkless? It would make everyone's lives so much better, so much easier. If he were quirkless, he could just disappear, no questions asked. That would be best for everyone. The longer Izuku stays silent and shaking and refusing to meet his eyes, the deeper his teachers frown. Eventually Aizawa-sensei sighs and turns away. All right, I'll leave this alone for now. But if you ever feel comfortable enough to talk to me about it, I'd appreciate knowing. I'll always be here if you need me. Now, go pick up your syllabus. Your first official day is tomorrow. And with that, the man turns and starts walking away. It can't be that easy. He's just leaving without answers? He's not pushing Izuku to give him the information he wants, to explain his quirk and why he detests it in excruciating detail? And he's just left himself open for Izuku to bother, not that he ever will, but it's the principle of the thing. But Izuku doesn't get it. At all. Teachers don't offer their time and effort like this without getting what they came for first or expecting to get more out of it. What is Aizawa-sensei's game? And the worst part is that if Izuku doesn't approach him himself, he may never know. Thoughts whirling in a confusing tumble in his brain, Izuku makes his way back to the classroom and picks up his papers, lost in his own mind and the thick fog of anxiety clouding it. He's sure tomorrow is going to be even more challenging, and he wonders how long it'll be until everyone finds out about his quirk and turns on him. He wonders how long he'll be able to take it. He wonders, in the back of his mind, if UA might just be different. It wouldn't do to hope after so long, but Izuku will never know unless he tries. And it's not like he's given up yet, right? Izuku slips out of the now empty classroom with the syllabus clutched tightly against his chest, trying to keep out of sight of the handful of his classmates loitering by the gate as he leaves and doing his best to blend in with the crowd. As he draws nearer, he identifies them as Ida-kun, Uraraka-chan, and Shinso-kun, unfortunately all people who would have reason to talk to him and that he would be rude to ignore if they called him over. Which, in keeping with his luck, Uraraka-chan does, jumping up and down while waving her hand in the air as if she isn't extremely visible already. Midori-kun. Hey! Reluctantly, Izuku approaches them and scans their faces for any sign of their intent. He returns Uraraka-chan's wave shyly when he stops a few feet shy of the group. Hi, Uraraka-chan. Shinso-kun. Ida-kun. Are you on your way to the station? Ida-kun asks, swiping his arm through the air to gesture out the gate. Izuku can only nod in response, since he is and doesn't feel like lying to his classmates who, beyond all reason, are nice, and Ida-kun noticeably lights up. Would you mind if we accompanied you, then? He has no rational reason to refuse them that wouldn't be assuming they want to hurt him, which would be unfair even if it's true of nearly all of the other classmates he's ever had. And when he glances at the other two, he sees Uraraka-chan's eyes wide with hope and some kind of muted interest in Shinso-kun's otherwise blank expression. With a sigh, he accepts, and silently falls into step with Ida-kun as the other boy works himself up into a rant about the glorious legacy of Yue and Kaken's disorderly conduct and Izuku's own clear skill and seeming prowess. He moves on from topic to topic, speaking passionately about each one, gesturing so urgently that Izuku has to brace himself so as not to flinch whenever one hand waves too close to him. Really, despite the paranoia, this all feels like what he thinks friends do, but he can't really say from his own experience. Izuku wants to believe in their intentions, wants to believe that they have no ulterior motive besides merely walking him to the station, but he can't trust them. He's not even sure he knows how. But they don't know about his quirk yet, so maybe he can let his guard down just a little? And they are training to be heroes. It would be nice to know what it's like to have friends, even if he knows it can't last. With that decision made, he forces himself to loosen up and pay more attention to his companions' words than their actions, though he can't help analyzing every micro-expression that crosses their faces. It helps that Idakuin is honest and straightforward, and Uraraka-chan is open and friendly. Shinso-kun, though, he worries Izuku, locked down and only letting the tiniest bit of interest and attention enter his expression as he listens with half an ear to Idakuin's lecturing. Izuku is familiar with such tactics. He tends to use them himself. They arrive at the station before he can decide what that means for how he should act around Shinso-kun, but he is grateful when his train pulls up so he can bow to his classmates and retreat before his anxiety spills over into something else. It's a relief to have time to think, even if the bodies crowding around him make him want to throw up. None of them know him, so he should be fine, but, well, that doesn't stop him from shying away from them all and praying to whatever higher power is listening for his stop to arrive soon. When he arrives home, it's another matter entirely. Ka-san, as is part of their routine, hugs him as soon as she sees him, though she's careful not to make contact with his skin. Even after all these years, he's not sure if it's for his sake, to protect him from whatever she's feeling, or if it's because she's still a little bit afraid of him and what his quirk can do. Still, such concerns don't stop him from indulging in the sparse comfort of her embrace, since her arms are the only ones he feels even slightly comfortable wrapping around him and holding him tight. And whatever her reasoning, he finds himself embarrassingly glad for her hesitance to actually touch him. Her anxiousness and overwhelming worry are clear enough already, draped over her shoulders and wearing her down. He doesn't know how he would react if she touched him directly, sending her anxiety to twist with his own and unspool in his gut like an afterimage of nausea. Probably not well. Dinner is quiet and charged with nerves as usual, but there's a faint undercurrent of something else that's setting Izuku on edge. He manages to get halfway through his food before he excuses himself, wraps his leftovers to put in the fridge, and bolts to his room to just breathe in the only place he knows he won't get jumped by anyone else. He doesn't bother changing out of the uniform he's worn all day before burrowing under the half-dozen blankets on his bed and letting the pressure of the weighted one on the top soothe him into relatively peaceful, if not entirely restful, sleep. For once Izuku doesn't jolt awake with the burning need to escape the house, though he attributes that to his exhaustion from too much social interaction, a panic attack, and whatever is going on with his teacher. The next morning dawns bright and clear and does absolutely nothing for the tension that is carried over in his chest from the night before, only compounded from his apprehension of going to school again and trying to talk with his classmates without stumbling over his own tongue and screwing up colossally in front of everyone else. It'll happen at some point, it always does, but he'll probably be unlucky enough to not be able to keep this brief respite he's found in between middle school and the inevitable revelation of his quirk for much longer. Real classes start today. But wonder how long it'll take his teachers to write him off this time? And of course, because the universe hates him. There's a huge crowd of reporters blocking the front gate. What more could Izuku wish for on this glorious morning? There really is no way around it. Izuku's going to have to push through the crowd of them to get to class on time, and he really doesn't want to give Aizawa-sensei any more reasons to expel him or turn on him faster. He'll just get through as quickly as he can and find a quiet bathroom to throw up in before class starts. Yeah, he can do that. Easy peasy. Except it isn't easy peasy, and as soon as the first reporter lays eyes on him, she's shoving a microphone in his face and asking him rapid-fire questions about All Might and what it's like having him teach and a million other things Izuku can't fully process at the moment because he's been pulled into the middle of the throng and there's more people shoving things in his face and yelling questions at him and they're too close, he can't breathe, it's too hot burning, there's too many people, he can't think, there's no air, please anybody help. Someone grabs his wrapped wrist and yanks him out of the mob, stepping between him and the terrifying masses and releasing him as they do. As soon as there's a clear space around him and the reporters are out of sight, he can actually draw air into his lungs, and he takes a moment to even out his breathing because he does not need to start today with a public panic attack like he did yesterday. Once he isn't in danger of hyperventilating, though, he looks up to see the dark-clothed back of his homeroom teacher, and it takes all of his willpower not to freeze when the man glances over his shoulder at him. He's thankful, though, when Aizawa-sensei turns back to the press and tells them off for harassing students and interrogating minors without parental consent or even presence. Not to mention, it's the perfect opportunity for him to sneak away and get to class before his teacher. And then he can pretend that nothing happened at all and his skin isn't crawling and aching and burning at the unwelcome, foreign touches of the media. He can pretend that he didn't take a quick detour to the bathroom to lose his breakfast and quietly ride through that panic attack he tried to hold. He can pretend that it will be a normal day at a normal school. But, sitting in his classroom surrounded by his classmates' idle chatter with Kaken seated stiffly in front of him, barely contained hostility rolling off of him in waves, Izuku mocks his early, fleeting idealism and tries to prepare himself for whatever challenge is to be thrown at them next. UA is a hero school after all. It's anything but normal. He can't afford to be weak or unprepared. He has farther to go than the others to become a hero, after all. When Yagi-san bursts into the room dramatically, Izuku allows himself a slight moment of calm. He'll be alright. Yagi-san is here. Yagi-san is here and announcing their first activity of the year, which, for some kami-forsaken reason, is battle trials. Izuku should start bringing painkillers to school for the headache he knows it's all going to be. Maybe he could bring some for Aizawa-sensei too? He looked like he'll need them. They're told to go change into their costumes, and Izuku takes full advantage of his classmates' excitement to slip away and change in a bathroom, relishing in the safety his own outfit grants him, a dark green, full-sleeved and gloved jumpsuit, a dark, loose overcoat full of pockets, and a hood with a full mask attached. Ka-san wanted to make the suit herself, but he managed to dissuade her and instead offered to let her advise in the design process. The best part? If the outfit was made to his specifications, the cloth is a specially designed fabric created with a metallic alloy and carbon fiber weave. Someday he hopes to incorporate nanotechnology to make the gloves and mask retractable, if he ever decides to use his quirk, that is, and possibly have his suit patch itself so he doesn't need to worry about touching people by brushing against them with a ripped suit, though he knows first years probably won't be allowed that kind of technology right off the bat. For at least, he hopes that's the case. He's the last person to walk onto the field, and thankfully everyone seems more keen on each other's costumes than his tardiness. Not that he can say he's any different, gazing around at them in awe and slight envy. Yes, he'd specifically designed his outfit so it wouldn't stand out, but that doesn't mean he can't admire their more flashy, hero-like costumes, right? Any excitement he might have drudged up quietly fanboying over his classmates is wiped away the moment Yagi-san all might, for now, in this form announces the pairings for the first battle. Kaken, Izuku's childhood friend rival, and Uraraka-chan, well on her way to possibly being one of his first new friends here, as the heroes and leaving Izuku paired with Tokoyami-kun who he's never worked with or spoken to, and Dark Shadow, of course, because Izuku is definitely going to count him as a teammate if he's sentient, which is so cool, and maybe Izuku will get the chance to talk to him. And they are the villains. Is there any way this situation could have been worse? Fighting Kaken, who is sure to be gunning for him, and having to play villain. Kaken would probably be smug if he tried to talk to him now, and he'd say something about even the heroes seeing him for what he is and giving Kaken the perfect opportunity to put him in his place. Tokoyami-kun, to Izuku's endless gratitude, is a calming presence at his side as they both take a good long stare at the bomb. The raven-headed boy tilts his head towards Izuku, and though his expression is difficult to read since his face is mostly beak and feathers, there is no visible or audible hostility when he speaks. I can see the turmoil in your mind, Midoriya-kun. You are unhappy with this matchup and with our assigned roles. Izuku bites his lip and doesn't take his eyes off the fake bomb. Well, Kaken kinda hates my guts. He'll probably go straight for me. And I was hoping Uraraka-chan would be my friend, but... He trails off wistfully, but doesn't finish the thought. He doesn't want to drive Tokoyami-kun away before the exercise has even started. In that case, Tokoyami-kun murmurs, stepping towards the bomb. We must show our mettle so there is no reason for her to doubt. He pauses at the papier-mâché weapon and glances back. Do you have a plan? A tiny spark lights in Izuku's chest. He offers a shy smile. I just might. Can I ask about your quirk? All Might calls for the activity to start, and Izuku takes a deep breath in preparation. He can do this. It's not like he currently has to act under the very label he's been struggling to avoid since his quirk came in, no siree. He's completely capable of slipping into a perfectly villainous persona without worrying about the impending panic attack he knows is going to come about after the exercise. He'll be just fine. Of course, he can try and convince himself all he wants as he waits on the stairs nearest the most likely point of entry for the heroes, but he's never been very good at lying even to himself. Acting though? Well, let's just say, if he hadn't wanted so badly to be a hero, he'd make an excellent actor. The voices of his opponents echo through the building, and Izuku takes another deep breath before pulling on a manic grin and stepping out into the hall. Ah, so the heroes have finally arrived. Uraraka-chan skids to a stop at his sudden appearance, but Kaken roars and blasts towards him without hesitation. Right hook, Izuku notes with as much detachment as he can. Defend with a wrist grab and flip. Kaken slams into the ground and bounces into the wall where the hall turns, his gravity nullified like Izuku had predicted. Izuku hears Uraraka-chan running behind him, footsteps quieting, and lets her run. Tokoyami-kun can deal with her easily. In the dark basement room they've hidden the bomb in, lit only by the sliver of a window near the ceiling. With the room empty, there's not much she can do. Tokoyami-kun will be able to defend as long as Izuku can. Keep the light of Kaken's explosions at bay, and he likely will be able to capture Uraraka-chan with the environmental advantage. Not that that will do much if Izuku can't capture Kaken, but holding out until the heroes run out of time is more doable. As long as Kaken doesn't kill him first, that is. The explosive boy isn't even articulate right now, actually, just roaring incoherently as he throws himself at Izuku again, aiming for a tackle this time and literally flying through the air. Izuku can't help but wonder at Uraraka-chan's quirk, even as he leaps straight over Kaken's head. Does it have a time limit for each object she touches? Or does she have to release it? How many objects can she affect at once? How large of an object can she affect? What's the backlash? Your fights with me. Kaken howls. What? Am I not worth your attention? Think you can afford spacing out when my fist is in your face? Dodging said fist just in time for the gauntlet to go whistling past his face, stirring his curly hair with its backdraft, Izuku takes the opportunity to enact the next part of the plan. Duck under Kaken's guard and bolt for the nearest staircase, calling over his shoulder, "This has been fun and all, but could you be a dear and stay back here? I have things to do, buildings to blow up." Kaken shrieks at him to come back and face him, but he also tells him that he always knew he was a shitty FING coward, and it's a great thing that he's finally owning up to it, so it's really up in the air. Though his opinion, for once, actually has no bearings on Izuku's actions. He can't let Tokoyami-kun down. He doesn't want him to fail the exercise just because he had the misfortune of being paired up with Izuku. It's actually kind of funny in a twisted way. Izuku has years of experience running from Kaken and baiting him to keep his attention off some other unfortunate soul. He can almost say it's thanks to Kaken that he can give him the runaround, lead him up several floors and away from the bomb, corner him in a room with large windows and only one other exit, taunting him all the while. If there were anywhere Izuku would have a chance to actually catch Kaken, it would be here. The ensuing fight once Izuku decides to stay in one room is brutal, and he honestly can't remember most of it after the fact. It's one long blur of last-second dodging around the built-up explosions from Kaken's gauntlets, not quite successful parries that leave stinging burns in their wake, cutting retorts that he wishes he came up with years ago with how effective they proved to be, and shouted words that really shouldn't get under his skin as much as they do for how long Izuku has been exposed to them. Shouldn't he have built up a tolerance to them by now? Isn't that how it works? Despite the success of his plan, Izuku can't even get close to Kaken. For some reason, even when All Might calls time and declares the villain's victory, it feels like failure. As soon as Izuku knows that their win is secure, he bolts. Why give Kaken a chance for revenge if he doesn't have to, after all? Especially when he still has one gauntlet full of his sweat, which should not have been authorized, Kami. He'd much rather regroup with Tokoyami-kun and ask how his side of the plan went, even if it was clearly a success. He's not sure if he would have heard the announcement of Uraraka-chan being caught, if it happened at all, with how deeply focused he was on not dying in his standoff with Kaken. Tokoyami-kun is kind enough to wait for him by the door, dark shadow still out and hovering over his shoulder. Izuku pulls off his mask and can't help gazing in awe upon the sentient quirk as soon as he lays eyes on it, though he is still tentative when he asks, "I know you already told me the bare bones of your quirk when we were planning, but would you mind if I asked a few more questions?" And he really wishes he could read Tokoyami-kun's face, because even though the avian gives him permission, he's not quite sure if he actually is willing to be bombarded for the sake of Izuku's curiosity. What if he's just being nice and humoring him so he can say that he made the effort later when he finally decides to go out of his way to avoid Izuku? Sure, he doesn't seem mad or annoyed, but he doesn't look wholly pleased with the idea of Izuku interrogating him, and in Izuku's experience, not clearly happy is almost as bad as ready to actually kill you. Not that Tokoyami-kun would kill him. He's training to be a hero. But so is Kaken. Izuku is suddenly less confident. He only realizes he's been quiet for too long in silent anxiety when he feels someone nudge his shoulder, and he looks up sharply to meet the glowing eyes of Dark Shadow. "You good?" Izuku blinks at the quirk's voice, because it actually hadn't occurred to him that he would be able to speak, which is actually so cool. It's like Tokoyami-kun always has a friend with him. He never has to be alone. That has never occurred to me, Tokoyami-kun muses, revealing that Izuku had been mumbling again and said that out loud, which is completely embarrassing. "I suppose you are correct." "Heck yeah, he is." Dark Shadow crows. "Can we keep him, Yami? I like him already." "People are not objects to be possessed, Shadow," the quirk's boy scolds. "It is his choice whether he wants to associate with us or not." "But I like him," Dark Shadow whines, looping around to perch on Izuku's shoulders, and wow, he's surprisingly warm and fluffy and soft. Most everybody else is so loud and flashy. Tokoyami-kun looks like he's about to admonish him about personal space or something, but Izuku giggles before he can. "Really, Tokoyami-kun? I'm honored Dark Shadow wants to be friends with me. I don't mind." Dark Shadow lets out a quietly triumphant caw and nuzzles into Izuku's cheek. Tokoyami-kun sighs, but does not protest further. Izuku hopes he doesn't feel bitter that his friend has taken a liking to him. Tokoyami-kun opens the door to the observation room and steps aside to let Izuku through first, who nods as he passes him and braces himself to enter the room. Uraraka-chan perks up at the sight of him from where she is talking with a few other girls in the class and bounces over, beaming. "You guys were so cool, Midoriya-kun. How did you keep Bakugo-kun busy? Did you fight him?" "It's not really that impressive," he protests, rubbing the back of his neck and wishing he still had his mask on as he realizes that half the class's eyes are on him. "I've known Kaken since we were kids. The strategy one used wouldn't work for anyone else." "All the more impressive," Ida-kun exclaims, gesturing sharply to the viewing screen. "You put your previous experience to good use, and despite the fact that Bakugo-kun would have just as much opportunity to analyze your own skill, you still have proven yourself against him." Izuku really hopes the growl from the other side of the room is someone feeling hungry and not who he fears it is. "Midoriya-kun, Karo, you're hurt." He startles. When had the girl with the frog mutation Azu-chan joined them? And looking down at himself, he sees she's right. Much of his sleeves, despite the durable material, are shiny and slightly warmed from heat, if not melted completely around the edges of various tears. Where the uniform is ripped, red and blistered skin is visible along his forearms, clear defensive wounds from defending his head against Kaken's blasts. There's probably more, but building nausea makes Izuku lift his head again and look away. Still, he offers a slight smile to Azu-chan. "It's not that bad. It could have been worse." "Anything can become worse," Tokoyami-kun murmurs from behind him. "But that does not make the pain we feel now insignificant." Is he trying to make Izuku cry? Is he telling him that he's allowed to acknowledge when he's hurt? Inconceivable. I'll be fine. Izuku insists, crossing his arms with nary a flinch to prove his point while simultaneously hiding his injuries from view. Now, whose match is next, anyway? With seeming reluctance, his classmates turn back to the screens where everyone else is already focused on the fight between the next teams, and Izuku feels his knees go weak with relief. He doesn't know how he would get out of it if he were sent to Recovery Girl. After the exercise, he slips away on silent feet to change and quickly rewrap his arms. No one will question them, since he's always wearing them anyway, so it's unlikely that he'll need to go out of his way to hide them. Then Kami. It only occurs to him on his way home after they're all released from class that Dark Shadow had been pressing against Izuku's cheek after the battle trials and nothing happened. His quirk wasn't screaming with thoughts and feelings and pain. His skin wasn't crawling at the contact. It was actually pretty nice. Maybe Tokoyami-kun wouldn't mind if Izuku cuddled with Dark Shadow in the future? Every year Shoyuta prays for students who actually have some modicum of self-control, and every year he finds himself disappointed. Seriously, all of this ruckus? Just because they want the dubious prestige of being class president? Please. You have the class PRD to decide amongst yourselves, he grumbles, sliding into his well-loved sleeping bag. Don't bother me until you're done. Not that he's actually going to sleep, like he wants his class to think. He doesn't trust them enough for that yet. Though Tenya seems to be doing a good job of wrangling them into some sense of order. Would it be too much to hope that the class would vote for him to be class president? Probably. Yep, and they have elected Midoriya. While they could have done worse, especially with Yaoyorozu as his vice, Shoyuta doubts the boy appreciates it. Now that Shuta's thinking about it, it's probably not a good idea, all things considered, to stick him with the representative job. Shoyuta had taken a look at the boy's files after the apprehension test, and he has a hunch as to why Midoriya doesn't like his quirk and why he shies away from all of his classmates. If Shoyuta is right, that boy's quirk counselor is going to have some explaining to do. And Shoyuta has to make sure that the kid is accommodated. He'll have to look at his files again to see if his scarf has been excused, because he honestly didn't care before now, and he makes a note to have Chiyo-san check his arms to make sure he isn't tying those bandages too tight and cutting off his circulation. But he can't do any of that right now. He dismisses his class for lunch and goes to track down Hizashi in the teacher's lounge, where he proceeds to grumble about his new problem child who seems to hate his quirk and, by horrifying extension, himself, while only showing fear and distrust when Shoyuta tried to confront him about it before. Plus the panic attack on the first day, and the near one after rescuing him from the reporters, if he hadn't gone to hide and have it after escaping before class. Not to mention the apprehension around his classmates. There are literally no good signs right now, and Shoyuta is tired. Sounds like you're already attached this year, huh, Sho? Is Hizashi's first reply, grinning like the traitor he is, though he sobers quickly, recognizing the severity of situations like this. Are you sure that this is all from the court counselor? Have you already checked out the little listener's parents? Shoyuta shakes his head, though his mind wanders to a midnight encounter, and he worries. The kid's files mention Midoriya Inko, a single mother. I'd rather not suspect her, if he isn't in immediate danger. I will be talking to her, though once I track down his court counselor, the kid needs a new one at any rate, and that requires a parent to sign off on it. Hizashi opens his mouth, no doubt about to crack what he thinks is a witty joke to lighten the mood, when the intruder alarms blare over the speakers. It's just one thing after another, isn't it? Proving himself worthy of being called Shuta's best friend, Hizashi checks the system for the disturbance, front gate destroyed, allegedly forced entry by the press, and offers to go help talk to the police so Shoyuta doesn't have to. You should probably find the little listener, he suggests on his way out, brow furrowed. If he's as skittish as you say. Which is how Shoyuta finds himself crouched in front of a hyperventilating kid on the cafeteria floor when the next block of classes start. Kid, I need you to listen to me, he orders calmly, one hand exerting a gentle pressure on the boy's knee to help ground him, using his other hand to shoo away his other students who for some reason have decided to stick around instead of heading off to their next classes. Breathe, all right? Then hold. There you go, just like that. As he keeps up his level instructions and encouragements, Shoyuta can't help but add a mental tally to how many panic attacks this kid has had within the first few days of school already. Merely labeling it concerning would be a major understatement. Being crowded by that many people all at once was probably hell for the kid, if he's as touch-averse as Shoyuta suspects. Paired with the intruder alarms and general panic, well, at least it's over. Though, come to think of it, the panic could have been one of the worst parts. Midoriya's quirk records implied some kind of empathic link. It was stated in the name, and in a chaotic, crushing mass of terrified teenagers. Shoyuta stuffs those thoughts into a back corner to be addressed later, when he's not currently dealing with an exhausted, frightened child. Coaching kids through attacks like these isn't a new experience, but it never gets easier. And so many, right at the beginning of the school year? It's like the kid is silently screaming, terrified of the shadows around every corner, but still somehow pushing himself to keep up with the rest of the class to prove himself. Definitely his newest problem child. Shoyuta dreads the impending paperwork once he figures out what's going on, but now's not the time to dwell on that. Okay, kid, he sighs, straightening and holding out a hand to help the boy up. Let's get you to recovery, girl. Midoriya winces at the name, offering up a small, wavering smile. He doesn't take the proffered hand. Do we need to, though? I'm fine. I've helped bring you down from 2 panic attacks, he states bluntly, not giving an inch. And the school year's barely started. I wouldn't call that fine. The kid blushes and ducks his head. That's, nothing new. I can push past them. Narrowing his eyes, Shoyuta crouches down in front of the boy. You shouldn't have to. Attacks like this are draining, and this school pushes your limits. I can keep up, Midoriya insists softly, still avoiding eye contact. And you don't have to worry about this affecting the rest of the class. I won't bring them down. There is so much wrong with that, Shoyuta almost doesn't want to address it. I'll be good, the boy promises before he's given the chance. You won't have to deal with this again. Don't waste your energy on me. Shoyuta wishes Hizashi were here. He'd know how to deal with this. But this kid needs reassurance, and right now Shoyuta is the only one available to give it to him. Midoriya, I want you to look at me. Shoyuta waits a moment, and eventually the kid lifts his head and makes reluctant eye contact. Shoyuta keeps his voice level, with all the sincerity he can muster. It is my duty and my privilege to be responsible for you for the duration of your time as my student. That includes your health and general well-being, not just your education. For as long as I am your teacher, I will do my best by you to see you reach your fullest potential. It is not a waste of my energy to help you get there, especially if it means helping you through attacks like these and helping you figure out how to mitigate them in the future. The kid's eyes are wide and filling with tears at Shuta's quiet speech, and once again Shoyuta wishes Hizashi were here. Crying has always made the eraser hero uncomfortable. Emotions are Hizashi's thing. But at least the kid is finally lifting his hand to accept his teacher's help up. Is that blood on his bandages? He gently grips the boy's wrist and turns his arm so he can see the damp, pinkish spots on the white material. He looks to the kid for an explanation. Midoriya twists his arm out of Shuta's grip without meeting his gaze and climbs to his feet, albeit a bit shakily. I'm fine, sensei. Cutting himself off as if he can tell his lies are falling flat, he heaves a sigh. You mentioned recovery, girl? Shoyuta gives him a long, critical look as he roughly dries his eyes with the back of his hand and decides he's done enough pushing for now. Chiyo-san can straighten him out until Shoyuta can earn his trust enough to actually help. With that he turns and leads the way to the infirmary, with only the boy's near-silent footfalls and occasional sniffles to assure him that the kid hadn't snuck away the moment he took his eyes off him. Of course, the nurse's first words once they step into the room are, "You've made a student cry already, Shuta-kun?" At least it startles the kid into a wet giggle as Shoyuta rolls his eyes at the accusation. I'm not that bad. No, she agrees pleasantly, ushering them into the room. You're worse. Midoriya, to his credit, tries to stifle his laughter, but Shoyuta really can't blame him anyway. He's had a roller coaster of emotions today, and this is a better way for him to crash from the adrenaline than how Shoyuta expected. Chiyo-san, the cantankerous gift that she is, sets about distracting and settling the boy immediately, and the next thing Shoyuta knows is Midoriya hesitantly explaining why his homeroom teacher brought him here, a half-empty bottle of water cradled in one trembling hand as the woman carefully unwraps the bandages on his other arm. "You should have come to me when this happened," she scolds gently, peering at the raw skin and burst blisters of his forearm but not touching. "There are ways I can help you without my quirk, you know." Because, horrifyingly, Midoriya had revealed his intense dislike and fear of direct touch due to his quirk when he explained the situation, and how it could hurt him, even. And if that doesn't make Shoyuta want to throttle his quirk counselor even more. "You're not drinking enough water either," she continues, dabbing burn cream along his arms with feather-light, gloved hands. "Dehydration is no laughing matter. And these bandages. I understand you want to cover as much skin as possible, but long sleeves and gloves do that just fine. You're going to cut off your circulation, young man." "The gym uniforms don't have long sleeves," the boy protests meekly, though he appears resigned to letting her have her way, smart kid. "And I don't own any gloves that aren't for winter." "The school will order some for you," Shoyuta offers from his spot in the doorway, startling the kid badly enough for him to almost topple off the infirmary bed. The man smirks behind his scarf and adds, "I'll get a long-sleeved gym uniform commission too." Tears fill the boy's eyes again, and he bows from his place on the bed, barely able to choke out a whispered, "Thank you." Shoyuta aches for this boy, and he doesn't even know what the root of the problem is yet. But he will. Oh yes, he will, if he has to fist-fight All Might himself to do it. Someone hurt this boy, should a student, and he's going to get to the bottom of it, one way or another. No one hurts these kids while they're under his protection. No one. Ida-kun directs the class as they board the bus, and Izuku is infinitely glad he passed on the position of class rep to his more qualified classmate? Friend? He shakes his head and dismisses the issue. He doesn't want to work himself up over it. The last thing he needs right now is to have another panic attack in front of Aizawa-sensei, not after last time, let alone the rest of his class. When it's his turn, Izuku hunches his shoulders and hugs himself to avoid brushing up against anyone. Recovery Girl had confiscated his bandages, his hero suit was still gone for repairs, and the long-sleeved gym uniform and promised gloves still hadn't come in, which means, for this trip, Izuku is vulnerable and paranoid. He finds a seat as far away from everyone else as he can manage and prepares himself for a long, vigilant ride. Unfortunately, his plan to stay away from his class crashes and burns almost as soon as the bus starts, the first spark being Azui-chan's curious voice. "Midoriya-kun, I always say what's on my mind, Karo," she starts, finger on her chin. "You aren't covering your arms. Anymore. They are very pale. It must have been a long time since you last had them bare." "Yeah." Kaminari-kun chimes in. "Why did you have them covered anyway?" Izuku curls in on himself, mind racing for a reply. Should he tell them the truth? That he covers himself because of his quirk? But then they'd want to know what it is. He can't just lie to them though. They're his classmates. He can't not answer either, that would be so rude. "Leave the guy alone," Shinso-kun's voice cuts in harshly. "He doesn't owe answers to busybodies." The others, suitably chastened under the boy's glare, offer quiet apologies before awkwardly returning to their own conversations. Little snippets about quirks and popularity and, surreally, Kaken's bad attitude are all barely audible at the edge of his hearing. "Thank you," Izuku mutters, face buried in his hands to hide his embarrassed flush. "I didn't know how to." "It's fine." Shinso-kun waves his words away. "They had no business pestering you anyway. You good?" "Yeah." Why is Izuku so choked up about Shinso-kun being nice? "I'm fine." The other boy gives him a dubious look, scarily close to Aizawa-sensei's, but doesn't comment further, merely settling in not far from him as a silent, companionable wall protecting him from the rest of the class. Despite himself, Izuku lets a little tension bleed from his shoulders. Just a little. The bus arrives at a large, glass dome not long after. Izuku loiters at the back, the last to leave and so the last to enter what is promptly introduced as the unforeseen simulation joint by none other than the Space Hero 13. But something is wrong. It feels too crowded for such a wide open space. Izuku can't focus on 13's rambling introduction because something in his gut is clawing at him, an unfamiliar bloodlust pressing him down and hatred raking across his skin. Aizawa-sensei, he calls before he can think better of it, voice cracking halfway through because oh Kami, he just interrupted 13 but there's something wrong so Izuku needs to seek it up and before he can warn his teacher, though, one of his classmates cries out in surprise at the dark portal coalescing by the fountain below and his bad feeling is swept away in favor of addressing the very obvious and immediate issue of the villains. One of which, horrifyingly, Izuku can recognize. It's not so much his face, which is covered by a disembodied hand, or his hair, which was covered when they first met and was unidentifiable in the dark anyhow, but his posture, how he carries himself. Izuku is certain that man is the same as the one with the disintegration quirk he'd met that night while he was waiting for his acceptance letter and too anxious to breathe in his room. He had spoken with a villain. He needs to warn his sensei. Wait! He shouts, lunging towards Aizawa-sensei, no, Eraserhead before he can leap into the fray. The one at the back, with the hands, he has a disintegration quirk activated. The other one, the one made of black mist, he looks like they're warp. So I think that one's his. Eraserhead acknowledges this information with a nod before launching himself into the midst of the thugs now crowding the USJ Center, not bothering to question where Izuku got his information from. Which is good for now, but less good for when this is all over and he has the opportunity to question it and second-guess his stance on not expelling him yet. No, bad Izuku. Save class now, freak out about likeliness of expulsion later. He grabs Shinsokuin's sleeve before his nerves can get the best of him, dropping it as soon as he has his attention, and lets his instincts take over. Can you catch Mist Man? How long can you hold him? Blinking once, startled, he takes a moment to reply. Maybe? As long as no one touches him. Izuku nods and gives him a push before sneaking over to Idakuin. Once the villain is distracted, you need to get help. I couldn't possibly leave the class here. The class president protests in a stern whisper, keeping a wary eye on where Shinsokuin is getting the villain's attention. Idakuin, Izuku hisses, distantly shocked at his own aggression, though it could be the feedback from the hostility surrounding them. You are the only one who has a chance at getting the heroes before we're all killed. He winces a bit at the wording, but presses all the same. You can save all of us, but you have to run. Shinsokuin's cry, of surprise? Of pain, prompts Izuku to shove Idakuin towards the doors just as a semi-corporeal hand wraps around his upper arm and turns him bodily to face the warp villain. He only has the presence of mind to realize that most of the glass is gone before the man is speaking, calm and cool and collected. Shigaraki was right, you are very clever. He tightens his grip and opens a portal in front of them. He'd like to speak with you, incidentally. A loud no from 13 is the last thing Izuku hears before he's yanked through disorienting darkness and sent trembling into the dirt. Hey, Sprout, Shigaraki croons, crouching in front of him with a wide smile barely visible behind the hand. Horrifyingly, he still has Izuku's bandage plastered under his jaw. Told you were smart enough to get in. How are you liking it? Warily, Izuku pushes himself into a sitting position and swallows the knot in his throat that threatens to silence him. Despite his efforts, his voice still wavers. You aren't here for me. Nah, the man agrees with a dark chuckle. I'm here to kill All Might. Seeing you's just a bonus. Hey. He tilts his head to the side, eyes glinting with sudden hostility. You don't happen to know why he isn't here, do you? Izuku can only shake his head mutely, wrapping his arms around himself as if they would be any sort of protection. Even if it isn't directed at him, the sheer venom simmering under this man's skin is making him dizzy and nauseous. Are all villains like this? How is he supposed to be a hero if mere proximity to such hatred incapacitates him? Midoriya, Aizawa-sensei calls, frantic and stricken and furious in equal measure, crumpled on the ground like a marionette with its strings cut underneath a hulking figure with raised fists. Shigaraki's head snaps up, a blood-curdling snarl in his voice as he commands, Nomu, kill him. Before he can fully process the words or think about the consequences, Izuku moves. Leaping to his feet with sudden energy and darting around the portals sent to ensnare him, Izuku places himself firmly above his fallen teacher and the creature towering above him, hands outstretched. Wide, wild eyes fix on him, and Izuku remembers to be afraid. Dark, meaty fingers close around the boy in a flash, pinning his arms. Abrupt, excruciating pain punches the air right out of his lungs before he can make so much as a sound beyond a small, pitiful whimper. The sensation of being torn apart and shoved back together wrong, again and again, with his blood searing through him like acid, is enough on its own for Izuku to wish he was never born. But then his quirk peels back the next layer and bombards him with pure, unadulterated terror. It's almost as if someone took the fear of a whole crowd and concentrated it, then mixed it with equal parts self-loathing and agony. Then came the voices disjointed, overlapping, pleading. Please, please, kill us, kill us please. We don't want to hurt, we're hurting, everyone's hurt. Kill us, please, the children, the kids. They'll die, it's our fault, kill us first before, too late, kill us before it's too late for them. Please. It's too much. Blood drips from Izuku's nose, his eyes, the corner of his mouth where he's coughed it up. His heart rabbits in his chest, skipping beats, burning. Izuku, only moments after contact, screams. No! Shigaraki screeches, lurching towards them. Drop him, Nomu. And Izuku drops, a faint, save us, kill us, please, echoing in his mind as his limbs twitch and tremble with aftershocks of pain. He barely hears Shigaraki's continued rant, rabid and volatile, because his face is pressed into the dust. This wasn't supposed to happen. My player 2 was supposed to be out of the way. All Might was supposed to be here. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku remembers and breathes. He breathes and, with a bitten-off whine, pushes himself to his knees. Glancing around, vision swimming, he tunes out Kurogiri's attempts to calm a hysterical Shigaraki and locks onto his teacher's still, bloody figure. Is he breathing? Is he alive? Izuku can't tell from here. In his peripheral, he vaguely registers the arrival of a few of his classmates, but he only has enough awareness to crawl slowly towards Aizawa-sensei. He kneels next to him, hesitates, whispers, "Please don't die, I don't think I could handle feeling that again." And he gently presses the back of his bare hand against his teacher's cheek. Arms screaming, limp, useless, elbow gone, head splitting, cheekbone cracked, eyes burning, aching. Something in his chest is off, feels so wrong. Izuku yanks his hand back as soon as the anger and fear and something else start bleeding through. Like with Nomu, the pain lingers, compounds. He feels filthy, even if he was just making sure that his sensei was still alive. Dragging himself a few feet away, Izuku heaves until his stomach is empty, until the wrongness he felt from Aizawa-sensei dissipates. "I am here," All Might announces, and everything is downhill from there. Trembling on his hands and knees, Izuku hangs onto consciousness long enough to see the mist man warp away with his inconsolable leader and to hear the rest of the cavalry arrive, too late for anything but cleanup. Slowly he slumps to his side in a cloud of dust. The face of Nomu, hovering over him in concern, is the last thing he sees before everything fades to black. The sounds of shouting and a door slamming open aren't the best to wake up to, especially with a concussion and the frighteningly recent memory of a child screaming in unimaginable pain. In comparison, that child's voice choking out a sobbed, "Sensei," is a soothing balm to Shuta's remaining aches and injuries, because that means it was all worth it. His problem child is alive. Alive and, shockingly, burrowing under Shuta's cast and into his side, somehow both gentle and gripping his hospital gown with a surprising amount of strength for someone who is usually so touch-shy, completely ignoring the doctor's protests. Additionally, Midoriya makes 2 aborted attempts at speech before finally rasping, "I thought you were dying." Despite the bandages over his eyes, Shoyuta lifts his cast-bound arm and places it over the kid's curls. "I'm not that easy to kill, kid. I'm not going anywhere. But are you all right?" Midoriya quiets slightly at his words, but is still audibly distressed when he tries a brief, "I'm fine." "You're in a hospital?" Shoyuta counters. "You were screaming. Forgive me if I don't believe you." The kid sniffles, pressing into the cast resting on his head, and mumbles, "Was just my quirk. Am not hurt." "Your extreme quirk exhaustion says otherwise," one up till now silent doctor comments dryly. "Yanking out your 4 didn't do you any favors either." Midoriya turns his face farther into Shuta's chest and doesn't reply. Heaving a sigh, Shoyuta nudges the boy. "Don't rip out IVs. Speaking from experience, it's a bad idea." "I needed to find you," he murmurs. "They told me the rest of the class was okay, but they wouldn't tell me anything about you, so I thought." Shoyuta shushes the kid as gently as he can with the re-emergence of his headache. "I'm alive, you're alive. Next is healing. You know whose job it is to help with that." He can feel the kid lift his head up as he admits, a tad sheepishly, "The doctors." "The doctors," Shoyuta agrees, smoothing the boy's curls as best as he can in an attempt to offer some comfort. "They know what they're doing, so you should go with them for now. You need to be able to attend class, right?" Midoriya snorts at that, and something in Shoyuta loosens, relieved. Shortly after, the boy is ushered out of the room as the other doctors start up a routine Shoyuta is unfortunately familiar with, checking the readings on the machines he's hooked up to and asking him questions. He follows along, familiarity streamlining the process, and soon enough he is being informed that a detective is waiting to debrief him and his student. Shoyuta sighs. He just can't catch a break, can he? Interviewing traumatized kids never gets easier, especially when in the presence of someone hyper-protective of them. Not even when that someone is a pro-hero he's worked with frequently. In fact, that might just make it worse in Aizawa's case. And, as the icing on the cake, he'd run out of coffee this morning and hadn't had time to pick any up before the start of his shift. Resigning himself to a difficult conversation, Naomasa follows the nurse into the room where the teacher and student are waiting, only to stop short when he sees a familiar face. "Midoriya-kun?" The kid's focus snaps towards him at the sound of his voice, green eyes blown wide. "Tsukachi-san." Naomasa can't see Aizawa's eyes, but he can certainly feel the interrogative gaze boring into him when the injured man asks, seemingly uninterested to the uninitiated, "You know each other?" "We've met," the detective admits, taking the open seat by the bed and across from Midoriya-kun. "Under better circumstances than this, but still far from ideal." "I never did get my answers about his quirk," the boy muses, clearly disappointed despite how close to death he was that day. "And it was such a unique one too." Clearing his throat, Naomasa taps the notebook in his lap. "Back to the matter at hand, Midoriya-kun. I need to ask you both some questions about the attack." Aizawa grunts his acknowledgement, and Midoriya-kun, while visibly uneasy, nods his assent. "Okay." Naomasa uncaps his pen and begins. "From your perspective, what was the first indication that something was amiss?" The boy shrinks into himself at the question, and Aizawa is the one who breaks the silence first. "Midoriya called my name in the middle of 13's introduction, and he was clearly distressed. It was a few seconds before the portal opened in the plaza." "How did you know something was wrong, Midoriya-kun?" The boy looks down at his hands, and when he speaks it's hardly a whisper. "I felt them. With my quirk. They make maid," he corrects, brow pinched. "Me feel sick." "Wrong." Naomasa pauses and assesses the child in front of him before gently asking, "Can you describe your quirk for the record?" His face twists in discomfort, and each word looks like it is slowly and painfully being drawn from the boy as he softly explains, "My quirk is called Empathic Psychometry. When I make skin contact with someone I feel their pain first." He glances sidelong at his teacher, brow furrowed. Then a few moments later I feel their emotions. It takes a couple seconds to untangle them? And it takes a little longer, but, he cuts himself off, chewing on his lip and pulling his gaze down to his own lap. If I'm in contact with them for longer, usually when I can't get away, I start to hear their thoughts. Only the surface level ones. And I try not to, but, well, it doesn't turn off. That last sentence is the first lie out of the kid's mouth, and Naomasa can't help but flinch at it, blindsided by how unexpected it is. This isn't missed by Midoriya-kun, who hurries to correct himself. I can't turn it off. I haven't been able to in a long time." "How long?" Midoriya-kun squirms, and Aizawa jumps in. Is that relevant to the investigation? No, he backs off quickly and changes track. But I do need to know how you knew the villains were there if your quirk is touch-activated. If there are enough people, he offers, voice even quieter than before and gaze far away. And they are feeling the same thing strongly enough, it bleeds through. It's everywhere. And the villains, they all. Wait, Aizawa cuts him off, making an aborted movement to sit up. Like with the panic after the gates were destroyed? Is that why you had a panic attack? And when I pulled you out of the press that day? Hell, was that what the first day of class was like? The kid glances up at the man, then back down. Yeah. It's overwhelming. All of it is. There's a moment of silence that Naomasa uses to compartmentalize so he can process all that later. Let's move on to the rest then. Though Midoriya-kun. He meets the boy's eyes for as long as he looks up. If at any point you need to leave, you can. He presses his lips together and nods, but for some reason Naomasa doubts he's going to take the out he's been given, no matter how uncomfortable the questioning makes him. Naomasa forges on. He's got a job to do, if they want a chance at capturing these villains before they can hurt someone else. So, what happened after the portal opened? He figures Aizawa will be the first one to speak again, but Midoriya surprises him, both of them, if that twitch is any indication, by blurting out, I recognized one of the villains. Even though it isn't directed at him, Naomasa can feel the strength of Aizawa's stare. Midoriya-kun can too, it seems, as he hurriedly explains, not that I knew he was a villain. And I only met him once. But, that's how I knew his quirk. You met Shigaraki, Aizawa concludes, voice low and face unreadable behind the bandages. When? The kid flushes and turns his head to stare at the wall as if it's the most fascinating thing in the world. The night after I first met you? Are you saying, the hero begins with a carefully neutral voice, that the night after I escorted you home because it's dangerous at night, you completely ignored my warnings and went out the next night anyway? And met a villain? The kid bows in his seat towards Aizawa. Please don't expel me, sensei. Why would I expel you? He retorts, his tone as baffled and exasperated as Naomasa feels. That was before you, first of all. I already caused you so much trouble, Midoriya-kun states miserably. And now I know one of the villains, and he seems to like me for some reason? Which can only be a bad thing, because he's a villain. And I have a history of not listening to you already, and you almost died. Through no fault of your own, the teacher interrupts. You already said you hadn't known he was a villain, and it would be irrational of me to assume you'd stop what is clearly an ingrained habit after telling you it's dangerous once. But what do you mean he seems to like you? Naomasa listens closely, choosing not to interject. He'd need the answer to that question anyway now. Midoriya-kun glances at the door, as if he wishes to be anywhere else but here, but stays put and braces himself to answer. Helped him that night. Not with anything illegal. But, well, he was bleeding and I had a first aid kit, so I offered to help. He didn't talk at first, but I made a comment about, he trails off, flushing, before swallowing visibly and forcing the rest out of his mouth. About how heroes only stop villains after they've hurt people, but don't often try to stop them from becoming villains. Don't stop society from hurting them first. The kid's quiet for a moment, but he's opening and closing his mouth as if he's trying to think of the best way to say something before admitting, that's been my driving motivation to be a hero for a while now, actually. It's why I respect you as a hero so much, Aizawa-sensei. But the villain, the kid breathes, voice falling quieter the longer he talks. He turns and addresses his next words to Naomasa. Shigaraki. At the USJ, after Aizawa-sensei jumped in to fight the cannon fodder thugs, their warper escaped and appeared in the middle of all of us by the entrance. He seemed to recognize me. I had tried to get Shinso-kun to distract him so Ida-kun could run to get help, but I don't know. He pauses and scrunches his eyes closed, breathing controlled and forcefully even. He knew me somehow. Said he was told I was clever, that Shigaraki was right, and then tossed me through a portal to him. Then Shigaraki, he called me Squirt. The boy's control wavers, breath hitching, and Naomasa can hardly hear his whispers anymore. Said he knew I was smart enough to get into UA. Then he told me they were there to kill All Might. Naomasa dutifully writes all of this in his notes, then puts his pen down to look Midoriya-kun in the eye. Would you like to take a break? Unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, the boy shakes his head. I'm fine. I want to get this over with. After that, something happened to make him mad. And he told Nomu the big-beaked thing to kill. He chokes, the long-suppressed tears pouring down his cheeks. To kill Aizawa-sensei. I couldn't let them. So I ran, without thinking or any kind of plan, just uselessly and desperately. I couldn't let Aizawa-sensei die. But then the Nomu it grabbed me. The kid's voice cuts out, and instead of speaking he stares sightlessly at a spot past Naomasa's head with his lips pressed together and the bar edging Aizawa's hospital bed held in a white-knuckled grip. When Naomasa goes to speak and postpone the rest to give the boy a moment to compose himself, however, Midoriya-kun snaps out of it, and when he speaks it is clearer than he has spoken since the questioning began. They were in so much pain, is what he says, tears still silently streaming down his face. Nomu. They begged me to kill them, before they were ordered to kill everyone else. They begged me to save them. Them? The detective echoes softly. Hadn't the kid just called Nomu in it? The people used to make Nomu. He closes his eyes. Or what's left of them. They're in a perpetual state of dying and being regenerated, I think. In constant agony. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. It's torture. He blinks his eyes open and looks directly into Naomasa's own. Did you kill it? Did you save them? I'm afraid all information on the Nomu is classified, Naomasa tells him gently, which in this case is fancy speak for the higher-ups took it out of my hands so I honestly don't know. He'd heard something about Nomu trying to follow Midoriya-kun's ambulance, but he's not about to tell the kid that. I think that's enough for today, Aizawa interjects gruffly, nudging the boy's arm with the elbow of his cast. Come on, problem child. Rest up, we have class tomorrow. Naomasa takes that as his cue to quietly thank them for their time and duck out of the room, giving Aizawa the space he needs to calm his student. That was a lot of information, most that he isn't sure what to do with. Maybe a coffee on the way back to the station can clear some things up. As an experienced underground hero, Shoyuta doesn't need to see to maneuver in his surroundings. Therefore his limited vision does nothing to stop him from signing himself out of the hospital and making his way to UA before classes start. His students protest his presence, of course, especially the more conscientious ones, but he doesn't shift. He can walk, he can talk, he can teach. He hasn't been late to class once during his career at UA, let alone miss a day entirely, and he doesn't intend to start now. Midoriya's focus is palpable as Shoyuta silences his classmates. The kid would be arguing for him to rest too, he suspects, if he weren't so relieved that Shoyuta is capable of standing in front of the classroom at all. Shoyuta is mostly relieved because he knows the kid is here, breathing and most definitely not a bloodstain in the plaza of the USJ. They're going to have a talk about all of that, eventually, but Shoyuta will let the kid adjust to classes again before that. He was stressed enough after talking with Tsukachi. There is no reason to compound it unnecessarily. Too bad he still has a job to do. You're not out of the woods yet, Shoyuta announces to the class, peering out the slit between his bandages and reveling in their high-strung anticipation, letting it distract him, just a little bit, from the more unpleasant topics he'll have to be focused on soon. The sports festival is coming up, and you can't afford to slack off. The class reaction is mixed, ranging from exuberant cheers of those grateful for something relatively normal to questions from those concerned about the safety of holding such an event so soon after an attack. They're loud, talking over each other, and it's difficult to keep their attention without his quirk. He does his best to allay their fears, explaining the school's reasoning, all the while watching the slow, rising agitation in Midoriya's fidgeting and posture. The kid seems to relax marginally once he gets the class under control and relatively calm, but Shoyuta isn't one to play dice with his students' health over an assumption. Dismissing the class at the end of homeroom, he walks over to the problem child's desk and gives him an assessing once-over. As far as appearance goes, he only looks a bit anxious, which can be attributed to his teacher's presence at his desk, which means Shoyuta probably doesn't have to worry about another panic attack. Still, there are things he needs to discuss with the kid, sooner rather than later, so he asks, "Can you come to my office at lunch? There are a few things we need to talk about, but I'd rather you not miss your next class." Midoriya nods hesitantly, arms tight around the yellow backpack held to his chest. "Of course, sensei." With a nod in return, Shoyuta steps aside to let the kid pass, though he calls after him to add, "Oh, and Midoriya? You have my permission to leave the room if your classmates become overwhelming. This extends to all of your classes." "Oh." Midoriya breathes, eyes wide and voice small as he hovers in the doorway, as if he honestly thought he would be forced to stay and try to learn in an environment that is causing him distress. "Thank you, sensei." "Not a problem, kid," he dismisses, mentally adding the kid's past teachers to his people to look into. "Just keep up with your studies and take care of yourself. Now, get to your next class." Shoyuta watches the kid bolt out of the room and closes his eyes, wondering if the kid will ever ask for help on his own when he's struggling, or if Shuta's going to have to smother him in it until he accepts. He wonders if he'll ever be able to hear the kid's voice without remembering the echo of his screams. With Shuta's luck, that time will be a painfully long time in coming. If it ever does. Midoriya fails to show up at Shuta's office at lunch, and the man waits 15 minutes before he goes looking for him. No, he's not worried the kid is having a panic attack in the cafeteria. "Shut up." The sound of hushed voices from around the corner prompts him to slow his steps, especially when they both prove to be familiar. Why is All Might talking with Midoriya? Scratch that, why is he talking with Midoriya as Yagi? And why does it sound like they already know each other? Shoyuta creeps nearer to ideal eavesdropping proximity. "Got to be here?" the problem child is asking with a waver. "I was less than useless during the USJ." Midoriya shounen, Yagi interrupts, firm and gentle and far quieter than Shoyuta knows him to be. "You have earned your place here through your own efforts. First years like you shouldn't even come in contact with villains, let alone fight them, and by all accounts you conducted yourself admirably. There is no shame in your suffering." The man might be a dunce of a teacher, but Shoyuta has to admit that he's had to have earned the title of #1 hero somehow. "What is this really about, Yagi-san?" The resigned, wary suspicion in the boy's voice is as much of a punch to the gut as his casual use of Yagi's name. Again, Shoyuta wonders how they know each other. "Why did you pull me aside? I should be in Aizawa-sensei's office by now. I don't want to disappoint him more than I already do." "I'm sure he isn't disappointed in you, Midoriya shounen. I'm sure he is merely concerned for you as I am." "While you aren't wrong, Yagi," Shoyuta interrupts, stepping fully into view at this opportunity. "This is something we should discuss in private, not in the middle of the hallway." The tall man rubs the back of his neck sheepishly and waves a hand down the hall, towards the offices. "Midoriya shounen mentioned meeting with you. Would you mind if I sat in?" Shoyuta regards him levelly for a moment, if only just to watch him squirm, and eventually sighs. "Fine. Our reasons to talk to Midoriya seem to align anyway." The boy stiffens further at this but still falls into place between the two teachers when Shoyuta turns back the way he came. The walk is silent, and Shoyuta would consider speaking up to ease Midoriya's anxiety if he thought it wouldn't do the exact opposite. Shoyuta lets Yagi take his desk chair once they arrive, because as much as he doesn't trust the man with his students, he doesn't even have a teaching license. Why did Nizo hire him? Had he seen the man's sorry excuse for a first lesson? He's not so heartless as to leave a chronically injured man standing, ignoring the fact that Shoyuta himself should really still be in a hospital. He nods for Midoriya to take the couch and leans against the side of his desk, looking between the other two while he considers how he wants to approach this. The kid looks one strong breeze away from having an anxious meltdown, so he opens with, "You're not in trouble." The kid nods at this but not like he believes him, so Shoyuta continues, "In fact, I believe we owe you an apology." Both teacher and student are looking at him with surprise now, and Shoyuta glares at Yagi because he should know how they've failed the entire class so far, let alone this child specifically. Smoothing out his expression under the bandages, he turns back to the kid and sits on the arm of the couch to be closer to his level. It's part of our job as your teachers to make sure you have the space and resources to learn and to help you when you're struggling. That includes taking into account how the classroom environment affects you and acting when something hurts you. Midoriya furrows his brow, as if he still doesn't quite believe him and doesn't understand what that has to do with him anyway. Okay. More directly, Shoyuta reminds him, you have had multiple panic attacks in the past few days, were attacked by villains when we were supposed to keep you safe, felt the effects of numerous grievous injuries even if they weren't your own, and are constantly subjected to high emotions whenever you're in a crowd. None of that is healthy, and it's been causing you distress. He doesn't say, just by touching me you felt how I felt and thought I was dying, even in comparison to how you described the Nomu, and how much trauma has come out of that alone. What did you mean by again? Shoyuta watches as something like understanding enters the kid's expression, softening and sharpening it in equal measure. Yagi speaks up next, again in that almost quiet, gentle tone from the hallway. We also need to correct whatever made you think you had to combat the villains yourself. Yes, you are in the hero course, but it hasn't even been a week. My boy, you were severely disadvantaged in that fight, and yet, as far as I've been made aware, it was in part your own actions that ensured the survival of many others. At risk of your own life, Shoyuta interjects with a note of scolding, which we will need to work on. Sacrificing yourself is hardly ever the first course of action you should take. Wide-eyed bafflement is Midoriya's only response. Shoyuta hopes he's reading too much into it, because if he isn't it means the kid has never been taught to value his own life, and Shoyuta might just need to ask Nizu's leave to abandon his classes to punch someone. Based on Yagi's expression, he might not even be leaving alone. If you say so, sensei, Midoriya accedes softly, biting his lip before adding, you're telling me all of this because? A few reasons. Shoyuta pushes himself off the couch and stalks over to his desk, nudging Yagi aside so he can reach the drawers. Using his capture weapon with fine-tuned precision, he opens one and withdraws a piece of paper, a list of accommodations and suggestions. First of all, in case I wasn't clear earlier, you have blanket permission to leave any room in this school if you are feeling overwhelmed. Empathy quirks are not to be trifled with, and we won't force you to stay in a stressful environment. Secondly, he continues, talking over the kid's attempted protest. We will be looking into post-mandatory quirk counseling to help you with your fine control and possibly help you relearn how to turn it off. The kid's eyes brighten at that last prospect, enough to make Shoyuta hesitate on the third point, if for the stigma surrounding it alone. Last, well, to be blunt kid, I want you to try therapy. The frequency and severity of your panic attacks are concerning, quirk or not. It will be a good way to equip you with healthy coping mechanisms, if nothing else. He holds up a hand before the kid can even do so much as open his mouth. 1 session. That's all I ask. You can choose to continue or drop it after. Somehow, Midoriya's anxiety seemed to gentle as Shoyuta spoke, so he's relatively calm, if still hushed, when he agrees, okay, sensei. I'll try. And that's it. Shoyuta had expected more of an argument, but he'll take a break when he gets it. Though there's one more issue to be addressed. And kid, he adds, just as the end of lunch bell rings. I'm not disappointed in you. Far from it. I only wish someone had offered you all of this earlier. There are, almost unsurprisingly, tears in Midoriya's brilliant, wide eyes. He bows, both in gratitude and farewell, and ducks out of the room to his next class. Shoyuta doesn't think this will be the end of the conversation, not indefinitely, and that further investigation will only reveal more concerns. Problem child indeed. Whatever Kendo might tell you, Nito does not have an inferiority complex. It's those 1A JRKs who have a complex and a superiority one at that. As if getting ahead because of a villain attack makes them better. Tetsu understands this and shouts from the crush of gawking students, don't get so full of yourself. If you bark too much it'll be embarrassing for you during the real fight. Taking the opportunity provided by his belligerent classmate, Nito assesses the competition. They all stand behind the biggest JRK 1A seems to have, disregarding Tetsu, with only 2 of them trying to calm the angry blonde down. Even their excuses are lukewarm at best. The redhead even seems to approve of the confrontational JRK's reasoning. It doesn't matter as long as you rise to the top. Police. And he's trying to be a hero? With the blonde marching away now, the energy seems to leave most of the crowd. A blubbering, purple midget has to be dragged away by his 1C classmates, babbling about transferring and impressing the ladies. Word of Nito loiters, interested in one as reaction to the issued challenge. They seem to be pretty evenly split between unsettled and unperturbed. It's only when they start filing out for lunch that Nito sees him the only kid who seems to be seriously considering the other class's opposition. Thus he's the last to leave, lost in his own thoughts, and Nito, ever the opportunist, acts impulsively as ever. "Hey!" he calls, jovially, and reaches to grab the boy's wrist to catch his attention. He was going to ask if all his classmates were so abrasive and uptight, but he ditches that idea when the kid jerks away and trips over his own feet, falling to his knees and covering his head with his arms as if he expects Nito to hit him. "Whoa!" Nito crouches next to him, alarmed and immediately toning down his snark to make himself a little less threatening. "I didn't mean to startle you, sorry. Are you okay?" The other boy blinks up at him over his arms with watery eyes and takes a slow, deliberate breath. "I'm fine. Sorry for, freaking out." "It's my fault," Nito insists, removing this kid from his mental grouping of 1A since he's obviously not included in their supposed superiority, likely thinking himself the opposite, if he's reading him right. And that just won't do, only because it makes for poor competition, and not because he's seriously worried about this kid's breathing, of course. He holds out his hand. "Come on, let me help you up." "Thank you," the boy murmurs, avoiding Nito's gaze as he accepts the proffered hand. Except, he freezes as soon as he makes contact, stops breathing, muscles locked, eyes glassy. Nito would refuse to admit it, but he panics, reaching for the other's quirk in a reflexive attempt to find anything he could use to help. And that's about when the world explodes. Well, not quite exploding. If he were asked to describe it after the fact, the best he would be able to come up with is that it's an entirely new sense altogether, outside of the regular 5, and that it is overwhelming in its intensity. Yes, he can still see, can still hear, but it seems almost arbitrary when he knows exactly where everyone within 100 meters of him is, knows what it would feel like to be in their body, knows the emotions dancing in the bones of each of them. He doesn't think the quirk is usually like this. The boy before him is the closest, the clearest, the most intense. He's terrified, both of and for Nito, and Nito was right before when he assumed he wasn't breathing. He can feel the ache in his chest as if it were his own, can feel the headache pounding at the back of the kid's eyes. They're a feedback loop, Nito thinks distantly as someone completely swamped in pain nearly flies towards them, increasing the compounding pain between the two boys tenfold. They're in a feedback loop that makes it worse for both of them, expands the other's already terribly too far reach, and Nito has decided he is never copying this boy's quirk again. For both their sakes. The man made of pain turns the corner and abruptly Nito can breathe again, only has to feel his own emotions and pain again. One as teacher, Aizawa-sensei, stands before them, eyes red and hair floating. Nito wants to apologize. To both of them. But he doesn't know how. The kid scurries away before he gets the chance anyway. Nito can only stare at the boy with a hurricane quirk under his skin, with his mind and heart open to everyone around him, open to be torn and crushed and twisted with vile, hurtful things, as he hurries down the hall until he's out of sight, then looks up at one as teacher with haunted eyes. I don't think that kid has ever been okay a day of his life if that's always what he's feeling. Aizawa-sensei is still facing the spot where the shattered kid was last visible. I know. Nito. Seriously messed up. He messed up so bad. Kendo is going to kill him, find someone with a necromancer quirk to bring him back to life, and kill him again, slower. No one will be able to find the body. And the kid. He was terrified of him. What kind of hero scares other kids? He needs to fix this. He needs to apologize and make this right. Does that mean he needs to start hanging around the 1A kids now? UA is different from what Izuku expected. He knew about the strict yet unpredictable teaching beforehand through study and research, knew about the rivalries and the high-stakes competitions between classes. But the teachers? The students? They are like no one he's ever met in his life. Take Aizawa-sensei, for starters, arguably the most surprising of the lot. He appears gruff and unapproachable, but on the very first day he apologized for making assumptions about Izuku's quirk. Apologized to him, and then offered to talk if Izuku ever needed it. All on day 1. Then he helped him get out of the crush of reporters on day 2, blocked him from them with his body. Helped him down from a panic attack the day after that with the break-in, made sure he went to Recovery Girl, stayed with him as she checked him over, and even ordered gloves and new gym clothes for him. Then Aizawa-sensei almost died protecting them. Izuku doesn't think any of his past teachers would even consider doing that, or letting him hug them to reassure himself that they were actually alive and he hadn't gotten them killed, or express concern about how Izuku's quirk affects Izuku. What kind of teacher apologizes? Tells him he matters. Teachers, they just don't do things like that. Do they? I mean, there is Yagi-san, Izuku thinks as he shuffles to the gates, drained from a post-quirk use panic attack and having half a mind to just lie down in a park somewhere and take a nap. But he's all might. Is there really any comparison? He's the #1 hero. It's his job to be nice to me. Besides, he hasn't been a teacher for long. Eventually he'll learn that I'm not worth his time. That I'm disruptive. Invasive. And that doesn't even begin to brush up on the other students. Midoriya-kun. Izuku blinks up at Tokoemi-kun, who's standing by the gate. His avian classmate puts his hands in his pockets and regards Izuku solemnly. We may each have to fight our inner demons alone, but that does not mean no one stands by your side. See, this is a perfect example of what he meant by students. Izuku grips his backpack, disbelieving and more than a little confused. Thanks. Tokoemi-kun nods once and turns towards the exit. Our comrades await. Comrades? Izuku mouths to himself, trailing behind the other. Uraraka-chan, Ida-kun, and Shinso-kun are all waiting just around the corner, talking amongst themselves. Uraraka-chan looks up at their approach and brightens considerably. Hey you two. We were just talking about going to get some boba, wanna come? The not-so-small thrill Izuku feels at the offer is undeniable, and a little sad in its intensity actually, so he says, let me ask my mom? Well, asks more than says. Stupid anxiety. Fumbling for his phone, he shoots Ka-san a text, my classmates invited me to get boba, can I go? It takes all of 2 seconds for her to respond, but her reply gives him pause. Are you sure, sweetie? Is he sure? He wants to say yes, wants to trust his classmates may be friends, but he's had classmates may be friends before who didn't tip over into the next category for very good or very bad, depending on your perspective reasons. I'll tell you if I need an excuse to leave, he texts back. There, a compromise. She replies with a thumbs up and a heart. Izuku tucks his phone away and offers a shaky smile to the others. Where to? They end up at a place Ida-kun recommends for their fresh ingredients and quality tea. They all order, Uraraka-chan humming and hawing with Izuku over the prices more than the others, before all finding a seat in a corner booth away from the door. Ida-kun speaks up first, pushing his glasses up as he addresses Izuku. Midoriya-kun, your strength and reflexes are quite astounding. What kind of training did you have before UA? Oh, right. People have conversations when they hang out. He tugs on his new school-issued gloves nervously. Nothing formal really. Basic strength training mostly and hauling a lot of trash. He doesn't want to say that his reflexes can be credited to his bullies. UA is supposed to be a new start, so they don't need to know, right? Besides, it wouldn't do for them to connect the dots with Kaken. You trained all by yourself? Uraraka-chan asks with wide, sparkling eyes. Well no, he admits, rubbing the back of his neck. It kinda have. I'm not quite sure if we're still going to meet up, but it's only been a few days since school started. Anyway, I had a personal trainer, technically. He gave me a workout and diet plan at any rate and supervised some when I was cleaning the beach. Wait. She holds up her hands and closes her eyes. Are you telling me you were the one who cleaned Dagoba? I mean, he casts about for a way to change the subject, face burning. He never thought he'd have to explain his far-fetched goal. He never thought someone would realize. So you did, Shinso-kun comments dryly and takes another sip from his coffee jelly pearl and dirty chai boba in what could be read as a mocking or sarcastic manner. Or Izuku is paranoid and reading too much into his companion merely enjoying his drink. Izuku buries his face in his arms in the hopes that maybe the ground will swallow him up if he presses down hard enough. It is noble, Tokoemi-kun muses, to only endeavor to bestow peace and happiness upon others from the shadows with no desire for personal gain or glory. They're so nice. Why are they so nice? Spontaneous combustion is scientifically improbable, Izuku knows, but it feels more and more likely that it will happen to him with each passing second. Why did they have to start with talking about him? That must have been difficult. Uraraka-chan exclaims, clutching her drink. I've passed it a few times before and there was a bus. A whole bus. Do you have some kind of strength quirk or something? So that's it. It all makes sense now. They may have invited him to hang out from the kindness of their hearts, but they want something from him still, just like everyone does. Something he can't give them, and that refusal might result in his abandonment anyway. There's no way he comes out the better for this. But maybe they'll be different? Maybe he can tell them about his quirk, and they won't be angry or scared or hostile or offended by his very existence. Maybe they'll still believe he can be a hero, that he's someone worth their time and warmth. But what if they're not so accepting? He's already been let down so many times, and he thinks even one more might break him, especially when they've already been so kind. Maybe, if they broke the news gently, it would hurt less. What if that's their plan though? What if they already know that his quirk is invasive and villainous? What if they can tell just by looking at him, and they want him to confess before they carefully let him down and tell him they're going to petition the school to expel him? He doesn't even know why the school accepted him in the first place, if they were looking at his records. Surely they don't want someone like him sullying the school's prestigious reputation. Surely they don't want something like him becoming a hero. Midoriya. Tears his head up, gaze swimming, and oh, where did all the air go? Midoriya, you need to breathe. Slower, come on. Whose voice is that? The black spots in his vision are making it hard for him to pinpoint a face. Can you even hear me? A small gasp provides him with enough air to respond with a hardly breathed, yeah. And the world quiets. Breathe. And he does. Don't panic when I let you go. And he doesn't. He blinks a few times, letting everything fall back into focus, before whirling on Shinso-kun with a wide grin. Oh, was that your quirk? That was amazing. Is it response-based? Is that why you asked if I could hear you even though I'd already reacted to your voice? Does it have to be a verbal response? What about sign language? Or foreign languages? Do you have to understand the response for it to work? What if the response isn't even a word, like a laugh? Do you have to ask a question, or is that just easier for you to get a response from? And what even happened, actually? Was it mind control? Please tell me it's mind control. That would be so useful for hero work. You could calm down panicking civilians like you did with me, or resolve hostage situations, or work in infiltration. Could you have asked me for information? Because that would make you great for interrogations too. How far does your control reach? Can you make someone act normally so your influence is undetected? Can you make someone perform a skill they haven't tried before? Can you increase someone's performance by bypassing mental barriers like trauma? Can you? Midoriya, Shinso-kun interrupts, finally pulling himself together from where he was gaping at him like a fish out of water, and one a little misty-eyed at that. I've never tried a lot of what you're suggesting. I've never used my quirk much. But it's so useful. Izuku cries in excited indignation, throwing up his hands. It has so much potential. A small giggle from Uraraka-chan brings Izuku crashing back down to earth, and he flushes again, curling into himself as he realizes just what he's done. A truly formidable mind, Tokoemi-kun murmurs into his straw. Ida-kun chops the air with his arm, making Izuku jump. Exceptional. I would not have thought to ask half of those questions. Do you perhaps have an intelligence quirk instead? Izuku grimaces, heart sinking in his chest once more, but Shinso-kun comes to his defense before he has the chance to spiral again. Can't you tell he doesn't want to talk about it? He snaps, leaning across the table to get in Ida-kun's face. He was hyperventilating. Ida. What? Oh yeah, because Uraraka asked about his quirk. It happened on the way to the USJ too, but clearly I was the only one paying attention. Shinso-kun could have hung the moon and stars for how grateful and awestruck Izuku is. And Tokoyami-kun, too, has sent him a meaningful look, and now Dark Shadow is curled up in Izuku's lap and pressing up into his hands. A comfort. Ida-kun even apologizes for upsetting him and his poor social awareness. Profusely. Uraraka-chan eventually shuts him up by offering an apology of her own and promising not to ask about his quirk unless he wants to talk about it. He's unreasonably grateful. They aren't going to pursue it at all? What did he ever do to deserve people like this? The rest of the outing is smoother, with most of the conversation carried by Uraraka-chan and Ida-kun, though they try to engage the other three as well, leaving little pauses every now and again in case one of them wants to interject. Though, Tokoyami-kun, Shinso-kun, and Izuku are more than happy just to listen and drink their boba. A little voice in the back of his mind tells him it's too good to last, especially for something like him. But just this once, he ignores it. They're going to be heroes. Surely he can afford some level of trust? Surely? Sorting through the kid's file is a nightmare. Most relevant information beyond the bare bones of his records like name and quirk is missing, and some of his records are clearly falsified. A frequent disturbance in the classroom? Picks fights? It's like they're talking about a completely different kid. And Shoyuta thought consulting his files would make this investigation easy. What a joke. But hey, at least he knows he needs to look into Aldera after he deals with this quirk counselor. That even if their name isn't in the files, all he has to work with is the name of their office and 2 notes made by a temporary school nurse referencing a medical file that doesn't exist and an expunged incident report about some unnamed villain encounter. Shoyuta growls, snatching the papers from his desk and marching towards Nizu's office. The rat should still be there, even though school's been out long enough for most of the other teachers to be long gone. As expected, the office door opens before he has the chance to knock. It's still creepy no matter how many times he's seen it happen, but he's used to it after years as a teacher and doesn't hesitate to walk right in. Nizu-san, he begins, consulting the prepared information in his head in case his boss decides to be difficult. I'd love to look into Midoriya-kun's school, he interrupts before the teacher can even start, his ever-present grin twitching in a way Shoyuta has long associated with danger. Aldera, was it? Shoyuta takes the principal's omnipresence in stride. So you read the files, I take it? I was also planning on asking Tasukachi to look into that expunged report while I take someone with me to Mizudafu General to track down the kid's medical records. Take Yagi-san. He'll worry himself to death otherwise. Raising an eyebrow, Shoyuta smirks. And this suggestion has nothing to do with the fact that Yagi has been checking in with you every hour or so for updates on Midoriya, right? Nizu sips his tea and does not comment. With an amused huff and a shallow bow, Shoyuta bids the principal farewell and steps back out into the hall to begin his hunt for Yagi. Though he has a guess as to where the man is. It only takes him 10 minutes to get to Chiyo-san's office. Shoyuta announces his presence so as to not startle the man. As satisfying as it would be, it wouldn't be worth Chiyo-san's ire nor the amount of time that would be wasted cleaning coughed-up blood from the infirmary. Not seeing a reason to waste time, he skips the pleasantries. Yagi, I need you to come with me to Mizudafu General Hospital. Midoriya's medical records are missing from his file, so we need to go to the source. The man's dedication to the kid is apparent by his lack of hesitation, murmuring something to Chiyo-san before standing to leave. Normally Shoyuta would want to know why the man is so attached to a student who's only attended the school for less than a week, but he of all people can't really ask that, now. Can he? Do you have a car? Yagi asks, his long strides keeping up easily. Holding up his keys in answer, Shoyuta messages Tsukachi with his other hand. Can you find any incident reports involving Midoriya Izuku? Specifically regarding villain attacks. It doesn't take long for the detective to reply in confirmation, but by then Shoyuta is already climbing into the driver's seat of his car. He hardly waits for Yagi to close the passenger door before he's pulling out of the parking lot. The spindly man calls ahead without prompting to inform the hospital of their investigation, politely ignoring how Shoyuta might be pushing the speed limit, just a little bit. For any other mission, the underground hero would be more careful to heed the laws he upholds, but he'd be an idiot not to realize how his urgency stems from getting emotionally invested. He's been careful so far in his career to not make that mistake, but he can't say getting emotionally invested in Midoriya's case is a mistake. Cammy knows the kid needs it. A nurse meets them in the waiting room shortly after their arrival and waves them over to follow him. 2 minutes later sees them all peering at a computer screen in a side office as the young man pulls up the kid's files. He has already verified with his superiors and the school, he says, and it sounds like this investigation is important, so he didn't dally. He has a soft spot for kids, he says, and he's pleased UA's teachers want to know what they can to take care of them properly. Shoyuta appreciates the consideration, and his mood lifts for all of 5 seconds before he actually starts reading the kid's records. Then he is filled with overwhelming fear, concern, and rage. As soon as Naomasa gets the text, he has a hunch that Eraserhead is on a manhunt. The fact that he wants all reports relating to Midoriya-kun isn't lost on him, especially after the USJ debriefing, and that only solidifies it. None of his current projects are urgent, so he wastes no time in his search. He doesn't want to get on a protective Aizawa's bad side. As it turns out, there have been 5 reported incidents where Midoriya-kun was involved with a villain attack, the last obviously being the USJ. Only that one and one other, however, are marked for him using his quirk, and the date of the latter is more than a little concerning. 9 years ago. The poor kid would have been 6. And according to the report, he was trapped in the middle of a slaughter. His phone buzzes, and he looks down automatically, only to see Aizawa's name on the call screen. The man never calls, unless it's an emergency. Cammy, what has he gotten himself into this time? Tsukachi, Shoyuta starts as soon as the call connects, switching it to speakerphone, knuckles white around it. Tsukachi, he says again, because he honestly doesn't know what to say. How could this whole list of injuries belong to one child? Aizawa. The detective speaks up, grim. It might be just as bad on this. He was smack dab in the middle of the Kanagawa Mall massacre. When he was 6. People have tried to kill him, Shoyuta blurts, near burning with the horrifying truth of it. Strangulation, beating, drowning, you name it. And he's never admitted to an attacker. All of that on top of undiagnosed anxiety, depression, PTSD, and suspected quirk suppression syndrome. There's muffled cursing on the other end of the line. I just pulled up the rest of his file. No one has pressed charges or accused anyone of any of it, and no investigation has borne fruit. The incidents taper off towards his teens, but there's a note here that says the kid had kept coming in with old injuries under the newer ones, and it's suspected that the frequency didn't drop at all. The main suspects are bullies, but the school seems like it covers all its bases to keep its records clean. If Shoyuta had a strength quirk, his phone would have been shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. They think kids did this? The kid's own classmates treated him like a villain? And Aizawa, Tsukachi adds, voice low. I think I know why Midoriya-kun can't turn off his quirk, and it might have contributed to the quirk suppression syndrome. Yagi places a hand on Shuta's shoulder in a show of support, though his expression is stone cold. The poor nurse is green in the face, staring at the screen in abject horror. Shoyuta takes a deep breath and braces himself. Hit me. The report for the Kanagawa Mall massacre says his quirk was active the entire time. It also says the kid, even at 6, was attempting to administer first aid and comfort those beyond saving. He was catatonic for 5 days after, the nurse whispers, leaning heavily on the table. Naomasa. Yagi's tone is darker than Shuta's ever heard it, sending chills down his spine. How many people has he felt die? The floor isn't exactly the most comfortable place to sit, but it's either that or collapse into Yagi, who is thunderous enough that he probably won't realize and will drop Shoyuta anyway. A young voice echoes in his head. Please don't die, I don't think I could handle feeling that again. Shoyuta thinks he's going to be sick. Some of these injuries are from an adult. The nurse chokes out, eyes still fixed on the screen now displaying a variety of images. They'd have to be. and some might be self-inflicted. Tugging on the young man's pant leg, Shoyuta guides him as he half sits, half collapses on the floor next to him. There's a long silence, everyone lost in their own thoughts. Shouldas are all questions. Who would do this? Has the problem child ever asked for help? If the kid's quirk suppression syndrome did start at 6, why did his quirk counselor do nothing about it? Why did his parents do nothing about any of this? It all boils down to 3 things. 1. A home visit is long overdue. 2. He needs to track down that quirk counselor yesterday. And 3. He hopes Niza burns Aldra to the ground. All that's left is figuring out how to actually help the kid. As soon as Izuku walked into the classroom this morning, he knew that Aizawa-sensei was on edge and distracted. It hasn't gotten any better over the course of the morning, and the others are starting to pick up on it. He half expects him to ask to talk at lunch again when he approaches his desk after homeroom, but he only informs him that he has arranged a home visit with his mother, and that she has asked him to offer Izuku a ride home. Izuku doesn't even have time to ask why before his teacher is walking away, and so a seed of dread is planted, growing into twisting vines over the course of the next few classes. Tokoyami-kun and Shinso-kun, either because they can read him that well already or they know something, intercept Uraraka-chan and Ida-kun before the two can ask him to sit at their table for lunch. After they leave, Uraraka-chan glancing over her shoulder with furrowed brows as she goes, the first two ask if he'd rather have lunch outside or in the near-empty classroom. Izuku is so grateful that he nearly breaks down crying then and there. They end up halfway up a tree, and Shinso-kun hands out homemade bentos as if there were no other way for this to play out except for the 3 of them to hide away together outside. Izuku does cry after the first bite, because he can't remember if anyone has ever shared lunch with him before, and it's so good. Shinso-kun nearly falls out of the tree, alarmed. Is it bad? I can go get something from lunch rush if. No. Izuku sobs, snatching Shinso-kun's sleeve to keep him in place. His other hand clutches his chopsticks in what might be desperation. I love it. The other boy still looks unsure, but he settles and picks up his own bento at Izuku's insistence. Dark Shadow, who had been watching this interaction like a tennis match from over Tokoyami-kun's shoulder, swoops over to wind himself around Izuku's still outstretched arm. Reflexively, Izuku releases Shinso-kun's sleeve. The bird-like quirk is quick to claim Izuku's arm for his own, nuzzling into his shoulder with a small trill. Tokoyami-kun is mortified, and Izuku laughs, putting his chopsticks aside to slide Dark Shadow's rough smooth knot feathers with one thinly gloved hand. He forgets entirely about Aizawa-sensei's odd mood until school lets out, and suddenly the man is there, waiting to drive him home. Izuku smiles to mask how his dread returns like a punch to the gut, biting his tongue to stop himself from asking what he's done to get in trouble this time. Aizawa-sensei would tell him if he did something right. He hopes the man isn't the type of teacher to say he did something wrong just to punish the problem child. But if Izuku isn't in trouble, why would he want to meet with his mom? And outside of school with Izuku there no less. Aizawa-sensei, newly bandage-free, opens the passenger door and motions for Izuku to climb inside. He doesn't wait around to see if he listens and rounds the front to climb into the driver's seat. The drive to his apartment complex is silent. The Midoriya's home is small and nondescript, similar to its tenants. It looks cozy, peaceful. Like nothing hides behind those walls, only a normal, happy family of 2. Kami Shoyuta hopes so. He nudges the kid towards the door. It takes a couple of deep breaths and what looks like a mental pep talk for him to finally open it, calling out with cleverly constructed cheer, "I'm home." There's a routine song and dance with hugs and smiles and greeting, but there's no mistaking the strain in both of their expressions, the caution, how Midoriya-san avoids touching her son directly. Out of concern or fear? Could it be both? Shoyuta scuffs his shoe against the doorframe to catch their attention and announce himself. "I'm sorry for organizing this visit on such short notice, Midoriya-san." "Oh, it's no issue." Her smile is welcoming, but her hands wringing each other betrays her nerves. "And please, call me Inko, if only to prevent confusion." "You're Aizawa-san, yes? Izuku's told me so much about you." She pauses, smile faltering. "Has something happened? Was he in another fight?" Oh, he realizes. She has no idea. Another fight, she says, as if that were all they were. As if all of Midoriya's injuries came from a mere schoolyard scuffle. Did no one tell her? Or did she know, and purposefully ignore her son's suffering? But no, there's genuine concern in those familiar, vivid, emotive eyes. Like mother, like son. So mislead, but by who? For what reason? Why do you think it was a fight, Inko-san? He inquires, following her inside and automatically noting the well-loved but well-used interior, as well as the clear anxiety written over every line of the kid's body as he watches his mother and teacher interact. So it's not. She sags onto the couch in relief. That's good. His middle school teachers would call about them, but it's so unlike my Izuku. He's a good boy, Aizawa-san. But Tamako-san, well, she would always explain it away as the hostility he would pick up from watching villain fights. She'd say that it is the expected outcome of his quirk. I know she's a professional, Inko confides, though a tad bitter. But I don't quite believe her. Izuku is always an angel at home. Mom. Midoriya whines, half ducking as he sits next to her and across from Shoyuta, hiding his tomato-red face in his hands. Please. She chuckles, smiles at her boy fondly, and Shoyuta isn't as worried about the possibility of her hurting her son as he was when he came in. Intentional harm is off the table, at least. But still she doesn't know, and that is unacceptable. I'm not here about a fight, Shoyuta assures her. But I am concerned. I have already spoken to your son about this, but I think he should attend additional quirk counseling and therapy. Inko furrows her brow, but she's listening. I know you likely know what you're doing as a pro-hero and a teacher, but I'd like to know why you are suggesting this. You've known my son for hardly a week. A few reasons. And he's honestly glad she asked. It's a good sign that she wants to know more, wants an explanation. It means her ignorance isn't out of denial. The USJ incident is the most obvious, and I'm recommending at least short-term therapy to all of my students because of it, but I think you can tell I've come here for more than just that. At this point, I think it's best that I be blunt. He looks her in the eye, knows she understands the severity behind this meeting. Your son has worryingly frequent panic attacks, avoids his classmates when he can get away with it, and actively suppresses his quirk. I looked to his files for an explanation and found his medical record missing, and when I dug further at the hospital I found reason to believe that, before UA, your son was abused, neglected, or both by students and teachers at his previous schools. And not just light bullying or the fights his teachers blamed, but calculated and aggressive assault. On various occasions. And that's only what's on record. Additionally, though I haven't looked as deeply into it yet, I have a hunch his quirk counselor aided and abetted, as well as clinically and subversively turning your son against his own quirk and, by extension, himself. He sits back and watches for the Midoriya's reactions to the bombshell he just dropped on them. He would have had this conversation without the kid present if he thought it would fly, but it is important that he understands all of this too, how the way the people in his past treated him was not okay, and how far Shoyuta is willing to go for him now. Izuku. The mother turns, hand tight on her son's sleeve. She tries to catch his gaze. Is this true? It's my fault. He curls into the arm of the couch, eyes fixed on his hands. I'm invasive, and all my quirk does is hurt, and it's wrong. They were only doing what they thought was right, or what they thought would keep them safe. No one wants a brat of villain digging around in their head. First the medical records, then the police reports, now the kid's own DM in head. Inko only stares at her son, stricken, so Shoyuta supposes it's up to him to address everything about that. Shifting off the couch to kneel in front of the kid, he lays a hand on his knee and presses down ever so slightly. Kid. The boy's eyes flicker up marginally, but don't meet Shuta's gaze, so he ups the ante and says, Izuku. Midoriya, startled, finally meets his eyes and doesn't look away as his teacher continues. You aren't a villain. You are farther from being a villain than almost every kid I've ever taught. Even if those people were scared of being hurt or thought they were being heroic, what they did was cruel, immoral, inhuman, and illegal. As for your quirk. He pauses as the kid tenses, screwing his eyes shut as if in preparation for a blow. Sighing, he gives the kids. Knee a small squeeze. It has a lot of potential. For example, as a rescue hero you would be able to assess what injuries civilians or fellow heroes have, determine who is in the most critical condition, and relay to emergency responders how to help them. As an underground hero, you would be able to feel out where large gatherings of villains are, and the third level of it would be incredible in interrogations. Even as an above-ground hero, being able to accurately read a room is vital for both determining the direction of incoming danger and maintaining your image in press conferences. Cammy, he's starting to sound like the kid. The kid, whose eyes have slowly been growing wider with every word out of Shuta's mouth, spine straightening in a mixture of shock and awe. Shuta's going to regret what he's going to say next if Hizashi ever catches wind of it, but Midoriya needs to hear it. Kid. They lock eyes, and Shoyuta tries to project his certainty. You have a complex, powerful, beautiful quirk, which can also be said about you, both your mind and your character. Neither you nor your quirk is invasive or villainous or whatever else people have told you. You have a right to be happy and healthy and safe and loved. You deserve to live, Izuku. And I'm going to do my damnedest to give you that. Dimon, Shuta's getting soft. And there is the crying he was expecting from the start. With a quiet, fond sigh, he cautiously pulls the kid in for a hug, giving him ample opportunity to pull away if he wants. Though, if the hospital after the USJ is any indication, yep, there he goes, latching onto Shuta's shirt as if it's the last stable thing in the universe. Shoyuta meets Midoriya Inko's equally soft and nervous gaze and gives her a short nod. He'll take care of her kid, help him along the path of recovery, if it's the last thing he does. On that thought, he still has a quirk counselor and a school to deal with, doesn't he? Izuku's classmates are acting weird. Not bad weird, but if Izuku had to pick a starting point, he'd say it started on the first day of school, except something weird for his previous classmates probably wasn't the same weird for these new ones. Adding that observation to the equation, he'd say it started on the third day back from the USJ, the morning after his meeting with Aizawa-sensei and his mom. Which he is adamantly not thinking about right now, thank you very much. Anyway, his classmates, they're being more weird than normal, ever since this morning. For starters, nearly every single one, except for Todoroki-kun and Kaken, of them approached him to say a short hi. How are you, lovely weather we're having? The only people he expected might were Tokoyami-kun, Shinso-kun, Ida-kun, and Uraraka-chan. And then suddenly he had classmates he had never even spoken to standing at his desk and acting like longtime friends. Or at least, what he expected longtime friends might act like. Their eyes darted around a lot, admittedly, like they were keeping some kind of watch. It set him on edge. What did they want? Even Ida-kun and Uraraka-chan deviated from the norm, each making their way to him during small breaks to ask for advice on their quirks and listening intently to all of his observations. In the background, Izuku is vaguely aware of people by the door, blocking it completely and talking to someone who Izuku can't see. The agitation is palpable. And now, moments after the lunch bell, they're nearly forming a wall around him as he follows Shinso-kun and Tokoyami-kun outside again. They arrive at the same tree as before, and that's where most of the class breaks off, heading back into the building and leaving Izuku with only Tokoyami-kun and Shinso-kun. Shinso-kun offers Izuku another bento. Izuku wonders what the hell is going on. Besides the conversation with his mom and Aizawa-sensei, what changed? It has to have been a quirk, right? That's the only explanation he can think of for a mass, radical change in behavior. But what kind of quirk? One that makes people nice to the target? But that would also affect Todoroki-kun and Kaken. Maybe a quirk that increases sympathy? Though Shinso-kun and Tokoyami-kun aren't acting any different. What about a quirk that lets others see when the target is going to die? And no one wants to tell him so he doesn't panic and increase the speed in which his death arrives? Todoroki-kun doesn't seem like he would visually react anyway. Kaken would think it's about time and let it happen. Shinso-kun and Tokoyami-kun would probably want his last hours to feel as normal and peaceful as possible, and the rest of them are likely all just being kind because he isn't long for this world. Izuku holds that theory for a second before dismissing it rather sheepishly. No, that's probably not it. Kaken would have laughed in his face about him dying like he was meant to, if it were. Aizawa-sensei would probably tell him, right? But then really, why the change? Why are they being so, well, nice? Or is protective a better word? Greenie. Without looking up from his food, Tokoyami-kun sends Dark Shadow to circle around Izuku's back, the quirk growling at whoever called out and blocking Izuku's view at the same time. Whoa whoa. Now that he's closer, Izuku can hear him better, and is that the blonde from the other day? I'm not here to start anything Class A, I swear. Copy quirk, if Izuku's remembering right, and that was not a pleasant experience. Actually, that means he knows what Izuku's quirk is, better than anyone else besides Tamako-san and Izuku himself. And he's willingly seeking him out. Which either means he doesn't understand what his quirk actually does, how it worms its way in and takes and violates, or he's here looking for trouble, no matter what he claims. You've already been stirring the pot, Monoma, Shinso-kun states bluntly. And now you've been asking around for one of our classmates, so. Sorry if I don't trust you. He doesn't sound very apologetic. Izuku peeks around Dark Shadow in time to see the blonde's Monoma-kun's face twist in guilt? Irritation? Or maybe he's constipated. That's fair. I still don't like most of you much either, but he turns to lock eyes with Izuku, where he's still peering around Tokoyami-kun's quirk. I owe Greenie an apology. An apology? Izuku echoes in mild shock before Shinso-kun can snap at that. What for? Yesterday? Monoma-kun squints at his partially revealed face in confusion. For grabbing you, and for using my quirk on yours without permission? What? Shinso-kun hisses, suddenly on his feet. What did you do? Izuku clambers upright, waving his hands as he puts himself between the two. It's really not that big a deal. It's fine. It's not fine. Both boys protest in unison, immediately turning to glare at the other as soon as the words are said. Shut up. If it weren't for the tension in the air, Izuku would be tempted to laugh at them for being on the exact same wavelength, but as it is he's nearly convinced he's going to throw up soon from sheer anxiety. Couldn't Monoma-kun have just forgotten yesterday's incident? It would have been so much better if he moved on and pretended he'd never seen Izuku before, instead of us. Tokoyami-kun's hand on his shoulder startles Izuku into a harsh flinch, but the avian merely nudges him towards Dark Shadow and faces the other two sternly. Now is not the time for such foolishness as this hostility. Monoma-san's intent to express remorse for his actions wreathed in unknown darkness as they maybe should be encouraged, Shinso-san. Though. Here he turns to Monoma-kun. I also share my companion's hesitance in allowing you to approach Midoriya-san in this manner with how you have expressed yourself of late. Dark Shadow wraps himself around Izuku's shoulders, crooning softly. The boy takes a deep breath and lifts one hand to slide the quirk, eyeing the other three warily as their standoff continues. Monoma-kun rolls his eyes. With you two standing guard, what could I possibly do? Let me just apologize and then I'll be out of your hair. The tension is thick enough to be cut with a knife, but eventually Shinso-kun relents and steps back, though he doesn't take his eyes off Monoma-kun as he approaches Izuku where he's still wrapped up in Tokoyami-kun's quirk. Even though he half expects it, Izuku's still startled when the other's bows far lower than anyone has ever bowed to him before. The blonde doesn't hesitate or stutter, voice clear even with his face turned to the ground. I'm sorry for causing you distress the other day, and for unfairly judging you just because you're in 1A. He glances up, eyes sparkling as he lowers his voice. Though if you ever need a break from any arrogant assholes, I'd be glad to provide myself as a substitute. Izuku, despite himself, feels the corner of his mouth quirk up, and he loosens his grip on Dark Shadow. Apology accepted, Monoma-kun. I'm sorry that you had to feel all of that too. The other boy waves his apology away as he straightens up. Nah, that was my own fault. But I gotta say, your quirk's pretty cool, though I bet it's hard to handle sometimes. He thinks his quirk is cool. Smile thinning into a grimace, Izuku ducks his head into Dark Shadow's head feathers. That you could say that. Monoma-kun nods in agreement, looking over his shoulder at the other two. I should probably get going before your two bodyguards blow a gasket. Wait. Izuku snatches his sleeve before he thinks about it, quickly retracting his hand when the blonde looks back at him in surprise. Green eyes flicker over to Shinso-kun and Tokoemi-kun before Izuku whispers to Monoma-kun, barely breathing. Please don't tell anyone else? There's a moment where Monoma-kun is obviously confused before his expression clears and something heavy settles behind his eyes. Of course, I won't tell anyone. Not until you're ready for them to know. As if I'll ever be ready, a piece of Izuku scoffs in the back of his head, but he still offers Monoma-kun a small, wavering smile of gratitude. The lunch bell rings, and as Izuku splits off from Monoma-kun, each returning to their own class, he thinks he might have a new friend. Someone who knows exactly what his quirk is, what he is, and still has treated him kindly regardless. Is Yue really that different? Can he finally let himself trust in people again?